Nurses begin walkouts amid warnings that the worst day of strike action in a generation is on the way.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 18th of January. This is Breakfast on GBNews with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news on this Wednesday morning. Patients are being told to expect widespread disruption as nurses begin a 48-hour walkout this morning. The nursing union has warned that if progress isn't made by the end of January, there will be further strikes next month.
The escalating industrial action comes amid warnings that February the 1st could be the worst day of strike action since 1979, with rail workers, teachers, university staff and now civil servants all heading to the picket line.
The Prime Minister's promised a bonfire of EU laws by the end of the year to promote growth and speed up economic recovery. His comments come ahead of the release of the latest inflation figures due in just under an hour.
And GBNews has exclusive access to a major police operation targeting the criminal gangs using the rail network to transport their drugs and illicit cash.
We've got a sealed bag, approximately £5,000 cash. So the gentleman's been arrested on suspicion of being concerned supplier.
Just some of the stories we'll be covering throughout the course of this morning here in GB News Breakfast. The top story is this.
Thousands of nurses begin a two-day strike today as part of an ongoing dispute with the government over pay and conditions.
Patients have been told to prepare for significant disruption to operations and appointments, although emergency care will be provided.
Well, February could see double the number of nurses joining the picket lines, with further walkouts planned over the next 2 months.
So let's now speak to a nurse who's not striking today, and that is Kelly Hopkins. She's an intensive care nurse, and you work in Liverpool. Today will be a working day for you, Kelly.
Yes, it will.
Okay, and how strange does that feel? You know, when some days some nurses will work and some won't.
It is hard because obviously we would want to be on the picket line, but obviously we have to provide emergency care and life-threatening care to keep our patients safe. So there are certain areas that are derogated. So if you're derogated, you don't strike, you actually go to work. So most wards are derogated so that there are numbers of nurses on the wards to keep patients safe and provide the care they need.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about why you chose to be a nurse and how hard nurses are finding it to fulfil that vocation and do that whilst bearing in mind we're speaking to the government later in the programme. You have their ear. So tell us exactly what your grievance is.
So I came into nursing over 25 years ago, and I became a nurse because I wanted to be able to look after somebody in their hour of need, if you like. I wanted to be able to brush their hair, hold their hands, give them the care that they need when they're unable to do that. And at the moment, we're not able to do that. There aren't enough nurses. There's 46,000 nursing vacancies that we can't fill, because how do we attract new talent into the job when they're having to get... I was speaking to a young nurse who's just qualified, who was over £85,000 worth of debt in student loans because she'd had to qualify up to master's level. And then she's coming into a job and earning £26,000 a year. That's before tax, national insurance, pensions taken out. They're coming in and working in conditions that are horrendous at the moment. So how do we attract new talent into the profession? We can't. A lot of people have left because of COVID. You know, the government is saying, oh, the care homes have got no staff. They sacked the majority of those staff because they refused to get the vaccine. So, and they've gone and got jobs in supermarkets where they're getting paid more money to work in a supermarket than to work in a care home.
Basically, you've got politicians, Kelly, who have never had a real job in their lives outside that political ring. But I'll tell you this, right? And I've spent a lot of time in hospital, unfortunately, about 3 weeks this year in hospitals. Let's talk about the A word, agency staff, right? So we're talking about not being able to attract people to the profession. No difficulty in attracting agency staff. Nothing against agency staff, you know, but they're paid at a higher rate. that's not the issue, because politicians and the authorities, they're saving on pensions, they're saving on holidays, they're saving on staff benefits, sick pay, all sorts of things by hiring agency staff. Therefore, they're cheaper and they're probably needed. What is the relationship between full-time staff and agency staff? What's your view on agency staff?
To be honest, we couldn't function without agency staff, and a lot of nurses are having to do agency to top their wages up. A lot of nurses are using food banks. I've got a relationship with the local food bank, and the amount of nurses that are having to use that on a weekly basis to feed their families is disgusting, to be honest. I mean, nurses are there to look after other people. Who's looking after the nurses at the moment? Nobody. Doesn't sit right with me, us striking. I never thought as a nurse I would be on a picket line. But the government need to take ownership and come to the table and talk about pay. You know, this government has raped the NHS for the last 12 years, and that's why we're in the situation that we're in.
It's interesting, you know, I was reading that Pat Cullen, the General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing, saying that yesterday she was at her lowest ebb, that she was really just despairing that they were having to take this action. She said it was heartbreaking that nurses were going on strike. And the general public are on nurses' side. That's what the polling shows. The general public support what nurses are doing. And yet, if you can, put yourself in the shoes of the Chancellor who's inherited this terrible financial situation post-war, you know, with everything that's happening in Ukraine, trying to balance the books. We've got taxes at the highest they've been in 70 years. He says that inflation is the single biggest enemy of those people who are going out on industrial action, that he needs to halve inflation by the end of the year. Can you see that he has an incredibly difficult job trying to answer all of the demands of the unions without upsetting taxpayers, without making inflation worse?
I do understand he's got a difficult job, but he didn't have a difficult job giving himself a pay rise and giving the barristers what they asked for. And I just think he needs to sit down and think about what the general public who are having to not have heating on days like today because they can't afford to turn it on. The last pay rise that they gave me enabled me to buy one loaf of bread a week extra for my family. That's what it equated to in real terms. And I just think they need to come and walk a day in our shoes, gladly come down to an A&E and spend a 12-hour shift without a break, without going to the toilet for 6 hours, and then come and see what they're having to do and how you're having to nurse patients on corridors and in ambulances. Would they like their relative to have to wait 36 hours on a trolley? I'm sure they wouldn't. Most of them have private healthcare, which I feel this government, this is what they want to do. They want to destroy the NHS and make it private. And most of us won't be able to afford private healthcare.
Do you have an objection, though, to people who use private healthcare? But surely the more people that use private healthcare, the more that are taking a burden off you and your colleagues' shoulders.
I don't, but then you've got to look at there'll be a massive gap where if you're rich, you get the health care that you need, you can get the treatment that you need, and if you're poor, you won't. And do we really want that when everybody should be entitled to health care? OK, so in conclusion, Kelly, this is not just about money. To say this is about money, which is part of it, because you're doing more work, you're doing far more work and having more responsibility. Of course you want more money and to be rewarded for that. But this is about recruitment, this is about nurturing people into the profession, and this is about politicians actually realising what's required to fulfil your job then. Definitely. I mean, if we could fill those vacancies, we could open more beds and then we could have more wards in the hospital. At the moment, there isn't enough nurses to run the wards that we've got, you know, and it's short-sighted to think, oh, we'll just carry on, and then eventually nurses with lots of experience are going to retire and that vacancy is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until there are no nurses left. Well, Kelly Hopkins, you put your case so passionately. We have huge admiration for you. Intensive care nurses, absolutely incredible. All nurses, but I have to say, having my father once being in intensive care, so much respect for ICU nurses. Thank you for telling us
Kelly,
your story.
Are you starting or ending your day now? Are you beginning or ending your day? Beginning.
Oh.
Well, I hope
a good
the
shift.
shift goes well, and
Thank
I know
you.
it'll be- I
Thank
know it'll be a
you.
long day for you, and we can sit here and say you're doing a real job compared to the likes of us. So respect to
Absolutely.
you. Thank you very
Thank
much indeed.
you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
God bless. Bye bye. Bye bye. I like when people wave.
I know,
That's
it's nice and it's
That's
human.
nice.
It's very real. It's very human.
whatever it
And
is.
nurses couldn't get more human than that, could you?
So the nurses' strike, it comes as Downing Street is talking about disruption, significant disruption right across the whole country. This is going to happen on February the 1st. Teachers, rail workers, civil servants, university staff are all going to walk out.
Well, it's being called the worst day of strike action since 1979. And here to tell us more is our head of digital news, Dan Falvey. Very good morning to
You know, I remember 1979.
Do you?
I was 19 then, so I was, and I remember the winter of discontent, and I remember the picket lines, and I remember the bins overflowing and all that sort of thing. And it did seem really dark and gloomy and wet and dank and hopeless. Hopeless, it seemed. What way is it looking now, and what way do people perceive it now?
Right now, it seems like Groundhog Day, quite frankly. You know, these disputes have been going on for a long time. You know, we've had the rail strikes have been going on since the summer. Nurses' strikes started last month in December, got more strikes today and tomorrow, and then they're planning more strikes in February to come as well, you know. And
But, point, if, as is hoped today, the inflation figures come down, does this not maybe justify the political standoff in this, that there's more room for negotiation if inflation drops and it becomes more acceptable, then the pay demand has to drop as well?
I think what you'll find is the Chancellor is going to make probably that point. He will say, look, our plan's working. Oh, we know we're not popular, but look at this. This is going as we expected, and stay with us, stick with what we're doing. Let's not talk about last year's pay. Let's look forwards, because these are disputes which happen every 12 months. They look at pay. And in 3 months' time, they're going to start negotiating on next year's pay. And we've not even worked out last year's pay yet. And what the Health Secretary and the Chancellor will be saying is, let's park the last 12 months. Let's look forwards. Look, our plan's working. We need to look at forwards, not
Yeah, it
backwards.
might be wishful thinking, though. You say, let's stay with us. 3 in 5 Britons think the government's more to blame for the length of time this row with nurses has been going on, according to an Ipsos poll. And you've done your own poll of GBNews viewers as well.
Yeah, we put out a straw poll last night on Twitter to gauge what our viewers thought about this. And we asked them, you know, is enough enough? Do you think the government should give nurses the pay they want? And 13,638 people got back to us on that. And it was quite overwhelmingly. 61% of people said, yes, enough is enough. Let's give the nurses the pay they want. So I think the politicians, they've got a real problem here that they seem like the bad guys suddenly. Everyone is against them on this. It's not just the nurses, it's the public as well. The public are saying, come on, these are the people who looked after us during COVID.
Yes.
Do the good thing.
But, but when we look at the whole civil service sector, the whole public sector, and Isabel made the point there, the Chancellor only has a certain pot to play with. And if he gives to one, he's got to give to the other. How does he justify all of this? I mean, surely people have to see the sense in, we'd love to give you more. In an ideal world, we'd love to, but there isn't any money there.
I think what's interesting is I'm not sure there's support for all sectors striking. So,
Right.
for example,
Interesting.
while we've got clear support for nurses and nurses getting pay rise, I think support is far less, for example, on rail strikes. So I think the government can be a bit more clever with this and say, actually, we're going to give nurses, you looked after us during COVID, we owe you a debt of gratitude. When it comes to the rail workers, they can say, actually, no, we're not budging on this. And I think the public would back them on that.
University staff as opposed to teachers?
I think it's similar on that one. I think what people see is, again, following the pandemic, university staff, they think students had their education disrupted throughout that. Quite frankly, that's not fair. They need to help those students who are paying £9,000 a year to go to university. When it comes to students in secondary school who've seen their education disrupted virtually throughout the entire time they've been there, if they're doing GCSEs this year, they go, actually, teachers, you need to be back in the classroom. It's not fair on these guys who are having their education ruined.
Look, meanwhile, you talk about people seeing the government perhaps as the bad guys in all of this. A little bit of red meat being thrown to the right of the party, anyway, from Rishi Sunak. This is on the front of the Express today. Bonfire of EU laws will help to boost growth. He knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing, but it's funny because when it comes to the Rishi Sunak government, there are fires to put out everywhere. And while this may sound like a good news story for him, he has actually got some tussles with his backbenchers on this one too. When it comes to this bonfire of EU law, what they're talking about is basically saying that by the end of this year, all EU law has to either be got rid of or amended, or the government has to specifically say, we want to keep this. There's a lot of backbench Conservative MPs who say, hold on a minute. We're the elected politicians. Why is it up to ministers to decide if these laws stay or go? We think that in the Commons, MPs should be able to have a vote on that. So Rishi Sunak's got a bit of a problem that some of his backbenchers say, we want the power to make that decision, not you.
And people will be asking the question, why has it taken so long since Brexit for all of this to happen? And I will say, I will believe it when I see it. I think this headline is an easy one to write, but what they'll actually do and practically what it will actually mean. And, you know, we look at the Northern Ireland Protocol as an example of all of this, and believe it when I see it.
We're going to come into the next election. I think Brexit is still going to be a spoken about topic, and the whole point of the last election was get Brexit done. It's not done yet.
Not done yet. Dan, thank you. You're not done yet.
I'm not done yet.
Dan's going to be analysing and looking at the emails that you're sending in, so please do get in touch with us this morning. You can tweet us, you can email us. Dan's going to be responding to the sort of things you're talking about and seeing what the polls are saying as regards the big subjects. Thank you very much indeed.
It is 6:16. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The Foreign Secretary is continuing bilateral talks in North America today, where he's due to meet with his Canadian counterpart to discuss joint efforts on their support for Ukraine. James Cleverly will say now's the time to go further and faster in giving Ukraine the tools to win the war.
Suffolk police are searching for 2 suspects after an 18-year-old was fatally stabbed in Ipswich. Armed officers and a helicopter were searching for the suspects who fled the scene on Westgate Street.
£60 million of government funding is to go towards building almost 6,000 new homes on brownfield sites. Developments could also create about 18,000 jobs in housing and construction. The Levelling Up Department says the money will help drive regeneration in towns and cities, as well as help more young people get on the housing ladder.
Now then, where do you stand, Eamonn, on treats in the office? In favour or bad idea?
Well, I personally, if I was in charge of an office, there would be no food in an office.
But you're always complaining there's no food here.
But we have no choice. But what I'm trying to say is I wouldn't have people eating at their desks.
Absolutely.
I think it's wrong for people to eat at their desk for their health. I think it's wrong that they can't take time to have a break and move away from their desk. I think food is messy. For instance, Isabel, I would never eat in bed.
Oh, no. Horrible.
No.
Yeah. And
I'm glad you're like that. So many people go, oh, no, I love tea and toast. Scrambled egg in bed.
I like a cup of tea or a coffee brought to me in bed. That's the absolute...
Crumbs all over your bed.
No. We have to have a tray.
No.
But
sausages in bed.
What about this? A professor has basically, and it's on the front of the Times this morning, saying, let them eat cake is a bad idea. So do not bring cakes into the office. It's akin to passive smoking. She's quoted as saying, you know, I wouldn't eat cakes in a day normally, but when people bring them into the office, suddenly I'm eating them and I'm putting healthy choices to one side.
And shut up, Mrs. What a ridiculous...
I think it's true. Do you know why?
No, I don't think it's true, because it immediately lifts people's mood. Offices are normally dreary, awful...
I know, but it lifts their mood and makes them fat and unhealthy.
What, one bun?
If they're doing it
one chocolate eclair, it's going to ruin your life. It drives me crazy because at school, every time they try to do a fundraiser, it's a cake sale outside the school gates. It's like, anybody heard about the childhood obesity crisis? The fact that we're the fattest nation in Europe? How about we don't give our kids treats? What an old killjoy you are.
No, it's healthy.
So what would you give them? What would you give them?
Well, like, bring a healthy snack to school pickup.
Here's a carrot and hummus for you today, kids.
No, they'll have some piece of fruit, which they love.
This is a lovely piece of fruit, children. Have this.
Yes,
or
Eamonn.
a big jammy donut.
Healthy. No! So we agree to disagree.
We agree to disagree because...
On your birthday, I'll allow cake, but the rest of the time, no cake.
No, I don't agree. No, I think a bag of sweeties is quite nice.
No, I know. Well, Charlie, our producer this morning, said, and I quote, I'm here for a good time, not a long time.
So what's Charlie? He's depriving himself.
He says, let them eat cake.
Yeah,
you know what? If I die early, so what?
There's not much I agree with Charlie on. But that one, Charlie, spot on.
There's not much I disagree with Charlie on, but on that, I do.
No, you see, look at you as an example.
There we go.
You're a miserable creature, right? You lead a miserable life,
right? No, I don't. I have a lovely life.
Les Miserables could be just dedicated to her, right? Why? You're a beautiful woman.
Oh, my gosh.
You've got such a lovely life, whatever, and you deprive yourself of the things that you're addicted to. Alcohol, jam donuts.
I don't deprive myself of things. I'm just trying to do moderation. Do you know why? I was reading an article in the car on the way here about Alzheimer's, and they said the key factors to Alzheimer's, not enough sleep, too much wine, and not enough exercise. And I thought, I'm doomed. I don't want to have Alzheimer's when I'm older, so we've got to try and tackle
Well,
these
it's a
things.
bit late for me now. It's a bit late.
Oh, gosh, we're all
yeah.
doomed. Anyway,
So-
let us know, where do you stand? Let them eat cake in the office or not. I suspect I will be in the minority on this.
And folks, get in touch with us. Who would you like to live with? Me or Isabel?
Oh, interesting.
Isabel.
I'll be genuinely interested to see what people say on that.
So would I, grungy old prison life with Isabel,
No.
or you have a fun
Tidy,
palace with me?
beautiful.
Look, Rylan came to
Not
visit
me, as
me
in
on
my home.
Sunday, and he had a lovely time in my house. We fed him, we watered him. You get up and down the stairs in my stair lift. He had a great time.
Yeah.
It was a lovely time.
Yeah.
He'd go to your house, have some hummus here and guacamole or whatever.
I
What
love
else?
guacamole. There's nothing better. Lots of chilli in my guac. Anyway, we've got to take a break. That was fascinating. I hope you enjoyed that. Let us know, would you rather live with Eamonn or Isabel? After the break, we'll have more on a GB News exclusive. See you in a sec.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Ada McGibbon from the Met Office. Staying cold for all of us today. Frost and ice fairly widely this morning, and a mixture of showers but also sunny spells for many through the rest of the day. Low pressure still in charge, but it's this low that has brought a wintry picture across northern Scotland overnight. That is moving down the North Sea coast. It will bring some showers into the east of England, northeast Scotland as well during the rest of the day. And watch out for icy patches in the west and the south following showers overnight. Those showers will continue into the afternoon, but there'll be a mixture of rain and sleet at low levels, snow over hills. And for northern Scotland, the snow level lowering once again, so snow at low levels in the north with further accumulations, especially over hills. But in between, there'll actually be plenty of sunshine, especially through this central swathe of the UK, 5 to 6 Celsius in the south, 2 to 4 Celsius further north. So still cold, but not quite as cold as it was yesterday. However, it will be breezier, and so it will still feel chilly, and that breeze drops out overnight. And as a result, with clear skies, for many it's another frosty and in places icy night. So some slippery surfaces about first thing tomorrow once again. And there'll be further wintry showers coming into the north of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales. I think for southwest England, it's rain that will make an appearance first thing tomorrow. That will mainly affect Cornwall, and the damp weather will tend to ease away by the afternoon, with brighter skies and showers following. There'll also be sleety showers coming into North Wales, northwest England, and further snow showers for mainland Scotland, mainly in the north. 3 to 4 in the north, 5 to 6 in the south, so similar temperatures to today, but not quite as windy. Then on Friday, it turns cloudier in the west gradually through the day. And what we'll see into the weekend is mild air slowly making its way from west to east, along with some light rain and drizzle.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Are authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Howard Jones, thank you. Who would I rather live with? Isabel Webster. Sorry, Eamonn. Angie Prescott.
No signs of I'd like to live with you hard at all. If you were called Harriet, maybe.
Angie says, I worked in a school canteen for 20 years. When it was a staff member's birthday, they'd bring in cakes. But fruit for those who chose not to have cake. Everyone was a winner. See, I like you, Angie, and I like you, Howard.
Thank you. Still to come on the show today, 10 to 7 this morning, we're going to be talking to, can't wait, the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick. That'll make our day, as the government faces the worst strike action in a generation next month. Anything you want to ask him, get in touch. Anything you think we should be putting to him, let us know.
Now, if you've been watching the show this week, we are going to be meeting Harry Farrell. We featured him earlier in the week because he wants to be a police officer when he grows up. He got given a little motorised police motorbike for Christmas, and we're going to be speaking to him and hearing his story at 7:45. Bless him.
That's lovely, that's lovely. He's 5 years of age.
He's had a tough time, hasn't he? He lost his father.
Yeah, he's just loving it. He's loving it.
He's having a little
GB Views at gbnews.uk. Get in touch. You can email. You can tweet at GB News or tweet me at Eamonn Holmes.
Now, at least 10,000 teenagers, some as young as 13, are being exploited by criminal gangs to transport drugs for them, GB News can reveal.
Now, most of the so-called county lines gangs are using the rail network to carry huge quantities of illegal drugs and cash to communities all over the country.
Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White's been given exclusive access to follow a major British Transport Police-led operation going after the county lines gangs.
It's the height of the morning commute in central London, and here on the Underground at Euston Station, the police are out in force. They're on the hunt for the county line's criminal gangs, using the transport network to ferry drugs, cash and weapons. Upstairs in the main station concourse, other officers have stopped and arrested this young man on suspicion of drug dealing. He was found with £1,400 in cash and a cheap burner disposable phone often used in drug deals. This countrywide operation is being led by British Transport Police and their dedicated County Lines unit.
I have 70 staff that are dedicated to this type of work across the whole of the network. We vary our tactics, we vary our locations. You may not see them out there, but they're out there every day looking for criminals that are involved in County Lines activity.
On board a train heading to the Midlands, this is rare access, following these plainclothes officers who are part of the County Lines task force as they look out for anything suspicious.
If you've got valuables in there, the last thing you want is just stuff being stolen, yeah?
A quick chat with this passenger and it's clear he's a legitimate traveller. But in the 3 years this task force has been operational, these officers and their colleagues have made more than 1,500 drug seizures, recovered £1.25 million in illicit cash, and taken more than 500 weapons off the rail network. On the day we were filming, here at Birmingham's New Street station, officers arrested a young man carrying this suitcase with 10.5 kilos of cannabis inside. Further up the line in Wolverhampton, another man and a woman were stopped carrying a suitcase, this time with 6 kilos of cannabis inside. More than 40% of those arrested by the County Lines task force over recent years were teenagers. British Transport Police now works closely with social work and children's charities to identify those who might be victims themselves.
If there is a young person or a vulnerable adult and there's a crime that's taking place, but we recognise actually they're a victim of exploitation, then you've got an investigation process and a safeguarding process that can run parallel.
Here at Coventry Station, another team of officers are working with police dog Ash and his keen sense of smell, a key weapon in identifying those worth a closer inspection. It doesn't take him long to pinpoint a likely suspect. As these plainclothes officers searched the man, it's soon clear the police dog was bang on the money.
We've got a sealed bag, approximately £5,000 cash. So the gentleman's been arrested on suspicion of being concerned supply. So we've taken his custody and processed. So we've seized the cash. We've got 2 of his phones, so they'll be seized as well.
With at least 600 county lines criminal gangs, it is a major ongoing issue for law enforcement right across the country, as our time with British Transport Police starkly illustrates. Tens of thousands of pounds worth of drugs and illicit cash seized in just a single day. Mark White, GB News on the Rail Network.
Well, their transportation system mustn't be too slick at the minute with all the strikes and delays and everything on the train. But anyway, that's what they do. It's interesting now to talk to a guy who's a youth leader, and he escaped a life of crime and now helps young people at risk of joining gangs. He's Anton Noble. Anton, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning. Good morning.
Anton, you know, Mark's report there, I mean, it's interesting to see that these gangs just use the existing transportation system like a logistical network. You know, they just use it, and they use it to their advantage. Tell me about these children, these young people particularly, that you work with, and the jobs that they are required to do, and why do they do it? How are they forced into doing this sort of thing?
So a lot of young people are involved in county lines due to their vulnerability. And a lot of these gangs now prey on their vulnerabilities of living crisis has gone up now, and people can't afford stuff. So if the child can see that his friends have got certain stuff, or his family members, mother and father, are arguing about money, or he wants to go somewhere and his family can't afford it, you've got a gang, a county line group that can fund it. And a lot of these kids now are seeing stuff on social media, people traveling the world, going to all these places, and they want to go. So it's like a new job centre, but a legal one.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, Anton, you talk about social media and the role of that and these vulnerable kids, and it just makes me think about Andrew Tate. And we've talked so much in recent weeks about, I mean, that name means something to you, right? Andrew Tate?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, this is the guy who promotes toxic masculinity. We hear about how he goes after these vulnerable young guys. A lot of them don't have positive male role models. Is that your experience, talking about people who don't have dads or who have absent fathers or fathers that themselves are in a life of crime? Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, I think they say 80% of young people that are involved in violence have fatherless, or father in jail, or they don't know their father. And you've got a lot of mothers that try to be both and try to be strong. But as you know, a lot of young men want to become the man of the house, and they grow up looking after their little brothers or sisters, and they want to make sure that their house is secure. And even though when they're 14, 15, when you've got older lads trying to exploit that mindset, it can change how they think and to do criminal stuff and do anything just to make ends meet, which, as we know, the mind of a young person does not develop until they're 25. So a lot of things change in teens, and I think a lot of the groomers do these kind of things at these stages because young people are living in thrill. They live in the next step. They don't look further on in life. They just look for what's going to happen now and what can see now.
Does that mean then, Anton, that the economic hardship so many people are going through, the cost of living crisis, has been a great recruitment tool for these groomers?
Yeah, it's a vulnerability. So it's they prey on the things. It's a market. So it's like them trying to sell a product, and this is the great time to sell. Come do county lines. We can fund you. We can support your family. You be going to a next area which you've never been before. You don't really come out of your state. You're scared to come out of your state because there's a lot of gangs there. Why don't you go to another area and no one knows you? You're safe. We'll give you a house to go in. But as we know, a lot of these things are illusions. When these kids go there, when I had to pick up a kid from a trap house, it was disgusting. There weren't no water in there. He didn't have sunlight. His skin was pale. His eyes looked like yellow because he's never had vitamin D because no sunlight or nice food. So all these kind of things that happen, it's all an illusion for these kids, and these kids get trapped, and then they have to trap other kids so they can get out. So it's just a mousetrap.
How do you get out of it? How did you break the cycle yourself? And what do you tell these youngsters, this kid that you picked up? You know, how do you change their lives? How do you turn it around?
So me personally, my life changed due to faith. I converted. I went to a Christian, and a situation happened with my brother, which made me think of life more, and life can be taken away from you at instant of a moment. And sometimes when you're around the wrong influence, it can make your mind think a way that's very dangerous for yourself and for other people. And for this young lad, I shared my experience with him and told him if his friends were really his friends, they wouldn't lead him down this route. And his friends wouldn't lie to his parents either about where he's going to go. So I said to him, you need to choose who's really close to you. And when he chose, he only had one friend, and the one friend weren't around him when he was doing criminal activity because he was ignoring him. Then that's how you know his friend is a true friend, because his friend always used to correct him. His other friends told him to do what he's doing. So I told him from who his real friends are and who weren't.
Will you keep on doing what you're doing, Anton? Anton Noble set up the charity Guiding Young Minds. He set it up 6 years ago to help youngsters escape a life of crime.
You're an amazing man, Anton. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Take a break there. After that, the papers. David Mellor and Scarlett Maguire with those after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deems & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 6:39. Let's bring you up to date with the front pages of the newspapers this morning.
The Mirror, first of all, reporting agency staff are being offered £40 an hour to work during today's nurses' strike. The Express runs with Rishi Sunak's bonfire of EU laws to help deliver a Brexit boost.
Here's The Guardian reporting on calls for an inquiry into the officers who allowed disgraced policeman David Carrick to stay in the Metropolitan Police.
And this is a big talking point today. So football last night, Wolves against Liverpool on the BBC. Gary Lineker, the anchor, was pranked during this coverage. And let me just explain that match of the way. Hey, so what happened was somebody placed a recorder or a phone under the desk set. They activated it and it made all sorts of embarrassing noises.
Pornographic. Pornographic.
See, Eamonn doesn't know about stuff like that. You're going to have to explain it to him.
I'm just saying it was porn that was being played in the studio. Yeah.
Dear, dear.
You have to explain that to him. He doesn't...
Not familiar. You can hear him heckling from the sidelines already. We're joined this morning by former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
And former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire. Good morning to you.
So here's the thing about that phone thing. It's quite funny, I suppose, but... it could have been a bomb. It could have been an incendiary device. It could have been somebody that had access to that studio, and then clips the phone under the desk and then activate it. So
I don't think it is that funny for that reason, actually.
Yeah.
No, come on. I mean, anybody. So what you're saying is, should everybody be searched before they're allowed into a live studio? I mean,
yes.
You know, it's... so I won't bring in a bomb. But I mean, you know...
But the studio should be searched.
It was a prank, right?
Everyone carries a phone.
Funny.
How do you protect against that? Even
absolutely.
if you were searched, would you be confiscating phones? It's, you know, it was just one of those things, bad luck. And you know what? Gary Lineker seems to be a constant target and source of amusement and, you know, such is life.
Just one of those things.
Did he find it funny?
He did find it funny.
Right.
Yeah,
I guess you probably didn't have any choice but to giggle in that environment. What's not funny, David? Front of The Guardian, clamour for an inquiry into those officers who allowed the rapist to stay in the Met. Harriet Harman among those, saying, you know, that they should be prosecuted, some of these guys who covered up for him or kept quiet.
Yeah, I think that the Carrick case is appalling, particularly now it seems as though he had a history of sexual assaults before he even joined the police. So effectively, the man has got away with it for 30 years. And it's impossible to have confidence in the police if it appears that they tolerate, by being willfully blind, the behaviour of a David Carrick. And when you actually look at the figures, 1,000 officers facing various kinds of accusations, you have to say to yourself, if we can't trust the police, who can we trust? And if you can't trust the police, it's a real blow to the integrity of our society.
Does it make a difference that he committed his crimes when he wasn't on duty? Because it is a distinction, I think, that's important for members of the public. No, but can I just finish? Because if you're a woman and you've got a Wayne Couzens type character who's abusing his position when he's in that position of trust, that is really terrifying. But I do think, obviously, what he's done is heinous, but actually he wasn't doing it when he was in his uniform. So if you called a police officer, there's no more reason to suspect he's going to...
He can't switch off from being a police officer, not a police officer.
And he was producing bits of equipment that implied that he was on duty.
The handcuffs, the guns.
Yeah.
And also he was using his position to say, you can't report me because nobody will believe you because I'm.
But how much more? I think the question that has to be asked is this: how much more are we going to tolerate from the police? The police have fallen away catastrophically, and every time you get some officer comes on and grovels, oh, we're so sorry, oh, we'll make sure it doesn't happen again, and then the following week it happens again.
And I agree with you, but what's the solution? They're already in special measures. What else can you do?
The special measures are plainly not special
what
enough.
else they can do? Whatever idiot didn't flag up the fact, this David Carrick guy, he's done that. He's been accused of what? Nothing's been proven against him. I mean, a blind man on a galloping horse could see that you've got a problem here. And also the argument about, well, he wasn't in uniform when he was doing such things. A politician wouldn't get away with that.
Oh, I'm not saying you should get away with it. I'm just saying, does it affect trust in the police?
Of course it does. So what I'm saying is you wouldn't say, oh, well, he wasn't in the Houses of Parliament when he did this, therefore that's OK.
I'm not saying that.
You're walking home as a single woman late at night, a policeman comes out of the darkness. 10 years ago, you thought, oh, I'm glad there's a copper around.
Yep.
And he said, look, I'm a bit bothered. You know, how do I get? What's the best way to go?
No question.
And
now, not so much.
now you'd think, oh my God, is he going to rape me?
Yeah.
But also,
I mean, that's a huge difference.
No, David, you're completely right. But what is really appalling is it's of the whole atmosphere within the police, that nobody was saying this is wrong, that he was known as Bastard David, just like Wayne Couzens. They knew about him. His pals knew about him. I mean, it wasn't a secret, and one wonders just how many more that there are jokes. And week after week, you see small stories in the newspaper about a policeman who has abused his position, you know, with a victim of rape or a victim of domestic violence, and he's gone back over and over again. And it's nothing like one rotten apple, even though that can...
No, there's a lot of rotten apples.
It's a whole... It's a culture of misogyny, and it is...
Well, there you have the point, because one of the problems is now they're all on these on these call groups.
WhatsApp groups.
Where you can
swap jokes, swap stories.
An awfulness. What it makes a rogue officer think is, I'm not alone. All my mates are like this, and it emboldens them to behave in a even worse.
But David, I totally agree with you. If I see another public figure come out and say, we have let you down, I'm
sick of it.
I'm sick of it. They have been taught by PR people, and they say, be ever so humble, be ever so humble, shed a tear if you want. Don't believe a word in it. Actions talk louder than...
And they always put a woman up, as they did yesterday, because a woman somehow is supposed to show, well, there are women in the police, it can't be that bad. Well, it is that bad.
But actually, what's so terrible about this is they're not even going to inquire into the officers who allowed it to go on. I mean, it's clamour for an inquiry to find out why nothing happened. Yeah. And that's what we've got to find. I mean, we know he's terrible. That's fine. But what we really want to know is, why was it allowed to happen? How many people were involved in not looking? Yeah.
How long it went on
We do have to apologise for the use of that nickname. I'm afraid we're not allowed to say his nickname on air. So apologies for any offence from that.
People are offended very easily. Get real. Right, Scarlett.
Exactly.
Post-Brexit, why has it taken so long to rip up our connections to Europe? The Prime Minister's over the papers today, front page of the Express, saying he's going to rip up lots of EU laws. But I thought we were supposed to have already done this.
Also, we're not being told what these laws are.
Yes.
The MPs are saying, hold on, sometimes there are good and there are bad laws. There are laws that actually are about freeing up, and then there are laws that are perfectly reasonable, like standards. And I think it's completely mad that we're just saying, well, we're going to do it all at once, and it's us, the ministers, not even Parliament gets to decide. And so I read through the Express story, and I could not find one example, not one law that they're going to get rid of, because it's just it's a whole tranche. And yes, you know, for Brexiteers, it's taken a long time. But actually, what are these laws, and do we really need to change them? And how much of this is Rishi just another PR push to try and make him more popular with the right wing?
Okay. Right, Son, this is the
I
front
think we need to take a break, because we have the Minister coming on, so we're going to take a quick break and come back to the papers after this. I'll see you in a sec.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Word on strikes before we go to Robert Jenrick from the government very shortly. And David, this is with you. Front page of The Sun says, well, find something to do on the 1st of February because nothing's going to be working. Nobody's going to be working. It's national strikes.
What we've got, in effect, is a national strike, but they just don't call it that. And I think what the Sun points out, the scale of this, it's unbearable, actually. It makes people who want to go to work, their ability to go to work and to function effectively is taken away. And I just think that you worry, what is the government's plan for all of this? I mean, first of all, are the government going to try and differentiate between some strikers and others? It seems to me the obvious thing is to try and do a deal with the nurses, because there's no sympathy. Whether there should be, I don't know. Angels shouldn't go on strike, but the angels are plainly going to get an increase. But do I really feel, after all the nonsense with the railway workers, they should suddenly get money that they wouldn't have been offered at the beginning of the dispute? So we've gone through this whole dispute, and what is the benefit to the community? None.
They rely on the polls, and the polls will say no one cares less what university lecturers are doing or staff or whatever it is, so they don't have to settle with them. But you came to power because of the strikes in 1979, the winter of...
When you were telling me you were 19.
19, yeah.
God, I was a lot older than that.
21?
No, I was a lot older than that. But it was nice to think of you as a 19-year-old, scratching your backside and enjoying all this news about strikes.
Yeah, I do remember it quite distinctly, and I do remember thinking it was like the end of the world.
Actually, the big one was even earlier. Was what brought down Heath. I mean, I think who's in charge? I mean, I think one of the things is you go on about the railway workers, David, but actually, what are you supposed to do if you want a pay rise, right? I mean, so you ask, you say, we're getting below inflation. You say we really want a pay rise. You say if we don't get a pay rise, we're going to do something about it. Yeah. I just think there is no other option, right? Well, and actually, it's not about, oh God, all these workers are ganging together. It's actually about the government sorting it out.
Well, look, it is a fair question, but we have to interrupt, yes, because...
Are you replacing me
I'm sorry,
with
I
Robert
am with
Jenrick?
the government. We are.
This shows very little taste or judgment, I have to tell you.
It's a respect for the office he holds. Let's introduce the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick. A very good morning to you. Welcome to the programme. Thank you for standing by. I just want to start off with the nurses' strike today. Here we are again. The last time the nurses walked out, 30,000 elective procedures and outpatient appointments were postponed or cancelled. The same will be happening today. How much longer must Britons endure this?
Well, you're absolutely right to say that it's deeply regrettable that the nurses have chosen to go on strike once again. We are working to resolve this dispute. Ministers have met with the Royal College of Nurses on numerous occasions, and we want them to call off these strikes, which will have an impact on patients. Of course, our advice to anyone who is unwell and seriously unwell today is to use the NHS as you would normally do. And we have worked hard to negotiate a series of derogations with the union, which will mean that services will be able to continue. But there will be a knock-on consequence, particularly in dealing with the backlog that's so important if we can get past the long shadow of COVID and get the NHS back into a better position. And that's really for the RCN and other unions to work with us and to call off these strikes, because they are harmful to the public and we don't want them to continue.
Later today, Mr. Jendrick, a waiting game may play in your favour. If the rate of inflation comes down, surely your hand at negotiations and the willingness to settle may be easier. Do you think lower inflation rates today may help settle a lot of these disputes?
Well, we will wait to see what the figures are. They'll be released in a few minutes' time. But if they do show that inflation has peaked and is beginning to come down, then obviously that's great news for all of us, including those working in the public sector. One of this government's 5 principal objectives is to halve inflation over the course of this year and to bring it back down closer to 2%, where we want it to be. And it does seem as if inflation is now starting to slowly fall. That will make life easier for everyone, and hopefully that will make it easier to settle these disputes. What we've said to the unions across the public sector is, come in and talk to us about next year's pay. We're going to be very open, in fact we already have done in most cases, of setting out what we think the costs and affordability challenges are across the public sector, what we think inflation is likely to be over the course of this coming year, and then work to find a sensible way forward that is affordable to the taxpayer and which doesn't add to inflation. Because if the news today is positive, that inflation has peaked and starting to come down, the worst response that we as a government could make to that is to increase public sector pay significantly and therefore lock that inflation in for longer than is necessary and get into a kind of homegrown domestic spiral of inflation. We should be responding to the first tentative signs of falling inflation internationally by redoubling our efforts not to make the issue worse domestically.
And you talk about these tentative signs, you talk about inflation, falling slowly, and yet we hear from the Governor of the Bank of England saying that actually it's beginning to fall, expecting it to fall sharply as energy prices go down. So my question is, is the Chancellor, is the Prime Minister, are they overplaying their hands on trying to manage inflation? Because we hear from Pat Cullen, the General Secretary of the RCN, she's had very successful meetings with Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, on Friday. She's written to him. She described it as collegiate. And yet the words she used was that she suspected that other figures at the top are blocking the progress.
I don't think that's right, with all due respect to Pat Cullen. Everybody across government wants to treat this matter with a spirit of collegiality, to be as reasonable as possible, to meet with representatives, to talk to them about next year's pay and the challenges that public sector workers are facing. But it is simply absolutely critical to everyone in this country that we do get a handle on inflation. As I say, if energy prices are beginning to fall internationally, then that means that some of the extraneous factors are working in our favour. What we mustn't do is domestically lock in inflation by seeing large pay rises in the public sector or indeed across the private sector as well. But the one area of the economy that the government has responsibility for, the public sector, we've got to be very careful to ensure that we're treating it sensibly, not leading to further rises in inflation, and thinking about affordability for the wider taxpayer.
I just want a straight answer from you, and then I'm going to ask David Miller for a straight answer because he used to work at the Treasury. Why can't you settle this year? Is the cupboard bare for this year? Is this like hire purchase or something that you're paying ahead for next year? Why can't the effects of inflation, the effects of the cost of living crisis are affecting these workers now, here and now, not next year, right? They can't afford their bills now. That's what they're worried about this winter. Why can't you say, here's a few quid to look after you this year?
Well, the way that public sector pay has worked in recent years has been through independent pay review bodies, and the unions, like most parties in British public life, argued for those because it takes the politics out of this and ensures that it's not ministers ruling by fiat, but it's through evidence-based policy making, where the different groups come together, they present arguments, and that's what's happened this year. Each of these different parts of the public sector have been scrutinised by independent pay review bodies who have taken into account inflation, retention and recruitment challenges. What we don't want to do is undermine that. I think that would be very harmful for the long run, and I don't think unions really want that either, because they were the ones who argued for independent
we've got to leave it there. We're approaching the top of the hour. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Obviously, we couldn't afford a light down there to shed some face on you. It's just the price of electricity these days. Thank you very much indeed. You've got 10 seconds, David, to tell me what you think of his answer there, why they can't settle this year as opposed to...
Because I'm a snivelling, sad creature.
Okay.
I agree with him.
OK, that's good to know. 7 o'clock is the time, and the nurses' strike dominating the news today here on GB News. They begin walkouts amid warnings that the worst day of strike action in a generation is on the way.
And as we... So nurses begin walkouts amid warnings that the worst day of strike action in a generation is on the way.
Hello there, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening. It is just 1 minute past 7 o'clock, Wednesday the 18th of January. Breakfast here on GB News. Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Patients are being told to expect widespread disruption as nurses begin a 48-hour walkout this morning. The nursing unions warned that if progress is not made by the end of January, there will be further strikes next month.
The escalating industrial action comes amid warnings that February the 1st could be the worst day of strikes disruption since 1979, with rail workers, teachers, university staff and civil servants all heading to the picket line.
The Prime Minister's promised a bonfire of EU laws by the end of the year to promote growth and to speed up economic recovery. His comments come ahead of the release of the latest inflation figures, which are out in the next few minutes.
GB News has an exclusive report, access to a major police operation which targets criminal gangs using the rail network to transport their drugs and illicit cash.
We've got a sealed bag, approximately £5,000 cash. So the gentleman's been arrested on suspicion of being concerned supply.
Lots of you getting in touch this morning. Thank you so much for doing so. We love having your company. We asked a little bit earlier on who you'd rather live with. Nick in Surrey says, for relaxation and a laugh, it'd have to be Eamonn, but pretty much all the rest say me. They say, if Eamonn accepts dogs and has jam donuts, it's his house. But Teresa says, not you, Eamonn, sorry. Andy says, nice to have you back, Eamonn, but I'd rather live with Isabel. She's lovely.
Great illusion that you create there. It's incredible.
Yeah, I've done well.
She's lovely, the lovely Isabel.
Yeah.
The lovely Isabel.
The viewers know.
The viewers know, the viewers know. Listen, agency staff, and I've made this point this morning, and whatever you hear from politicians with smoke screens or whatever, this is the truth from Stephen. He says agency staff are paid at a higher rate because they don't get the same benefits as direct employees. They have no holiday pay, low or no pension contributions, no sick pay, and contracts that can be terminated immediately. However, the government will steal from them as well because HMRC will decide that they are staff jobs as opposed to insecure freelance jobs as well. So it's a lose-lose, and you'll hear government saying, oh, we pay too much in agency staff. They make the rules. They have decided that it sounds like the hourly rate for agency staff is high, but the overall benefit in terms of compared to being a staff member are much, much different. So the business needs agency staff. We heard an intensive care nurse this morning on this very programme saying nurses who are staff have to supplement their income by being agency as well. So you can't have it both ways, government. You either hire people full-time or you get rid of agency staff. You know, it's one or the other. Use agency staff, I suppose, as well. But appreciate all those views. GB Views
keep them
at
coming in.
gbnews.uk.
So it is our top story this morning. We are talking about nurses. Thousands of them are beginning another strike, 2 days this time, as part of an ongoing dispute with the government over, as we've been discussing, pay and conditions.
So patients have been told to prepare for significant disruption to operations, appointments, although emergency care, we are told, will be provided.
But February could see double the number of nurses joining the picket lines, with further walkouts planned over the next 2 months.
Here's what intensive care nurse Kelly Hopkins had to say on all of this when we spoke to her earlier this morning.
I came into nursing over 25 years ago, and I became a nurse because I wanted to be able to look after somebody in their hour of need, if you like. I wanted to be able to brush their hair, hold their hands, give them the care that they need when they're unable to do that. And at the moment, we're not able to do that. There aren't enough nurses. There's 46,000 nursing vacancies that we can't fill, because how do we attract new talent into the job? I was speaking to a young nurse who's just qualified, who was over £85,000 worth of debt in student loans because she'd had to qualify up to master's level. And then she's coming into a job and earning £26,000 a year. That's before tax, national insurance, pensions taken out. They're coming in and working in conditions that are horrendous at the moment. So how do we attract new talent into the profession? We can't.
So let's go to Ray Addison. Ray's our South East reporter. He's currently at Royal Sussex County Hospital, and that's in Brighton, Ray. So tell us what's happening where you are.
Yes, good morning to you both. Welcome to Royal Sussex County Hospital here in Brighton. It's one of 2 hospitals here where the strike action is taking place. Brighton General, just about 5 miles down the road as well, will also see nurses striking today. This, I'm told by the Royal College of Nursing, will be the biggest picket line. It's due to set up from about 7:30 this morning, and they'll be striking for 12 hours. Of course, that's the first day of action. Second day will be taking place tomorrow as well. Now, we know, of course, historically, December saw the very first nursing strikes, but Sussex nurses were not involved in that action, but today and tomorrow they will be. So it really is a ramp up of that strike action. So what are nurses asking for? Well, they're saying that years of real-term pay cuts have started to push nurses out of the profession and also impacted patient safety. They're asking for a pay rise that's 5% above the rate of inflation. I spoke to the trust earlier on, and I was asking how many nurses are actually going to be striking in Sussex, and particularly here at the Royal Sussex. They said they actually aren't able to tell me at this stage. It's very much down to who turns up across the 2 days and who doesn't, more importantly. But they say they are going to publish that data on Friday, and so that's when we'll find out. In the meantime, all emergency services will be staffed. Clinics will be running as well, but at a reduced rate. And they're saying to people, if you haven't been contacted to be told that your appointment is not running today, then you should still turn up. And I think that's quite important. Still turn up to your appointment unless you've been told directly by a member of the NHS that you shouldn't attend. In the meantime, of course, the issue of beds is very important. Freeing up beds, they're saying people here in Brighton can really help out by coming and collecting their relatives in a timely fashion when they're being discharged, in order to free up those beds and make sure that facilities are available for those that really need it the most.
We're just getting some breaking news, and the Office for National Statistics has just released the latest inflation figures. So let's go to our man Liam Halligan on this one. What's it telling us?
The Consumer Price Index, Eamonn, in December was 10.5% higher than in December 2021. That's down from 10.7% in November. This is a reduction in inflation, but inflation is still in double digits. Just in October, the number was 11.1. That was a 41-year high. So this is an easing in the cost of living crisis. Inflation is falling, but I would say that this is pretty disappointing. The Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, said just earlier this week he was looking to a rapid fall in inflation, given that energy prices are falling across the world. The price of natural gas yesterday on international markets in Europe was 55 euros per megawatt hour. In December, it was 150 euros per megawatt hour. Energy prices are falling, but inflation is proving quite sticky. This will not help the government when it comes to trying to negotiate wage demands.
Why is that then? Because I know he was saying, look, this rapid fall is going to be great for inflation, but there's some problem with worker shortages really being a major factor in all of this.
Yeah, but there is obviously a shortage of workers. We heard yesterday, Isabel, that pay across the UK went up by 6.4% during the last few months of 2022 compared to the same period in the previous year. That's the highest increase in nominal pay since 2001. That's pushing up firms' costs, of course. They pass those costs on. The ONS has just released a statement saying prices at the pump did fall noticeably in December, talking, of course, about petrol. Not so much diesel, as van drivers will know, but certainly petrol, with the cost of clothing also slightly dropping back. However, said the ONS, this was offset by increases for coach and airfares, as well as overnight hotel accommodation. Food costs, this is the big one, continue to spike, with prices also rising in restaurants, cafes and shops.
We've got a statement from the Chancellor just been released in relation to the story. He says, high inflation is a nightmare for family budgets. It destroys business investment. It leads to strike action. So however tough, we need to stick to our plan to bring it down. While any fall in inflation is welcome, we have a plan to go further and halve inflation this year, reduce debt and grow the economy. But it is vital that we take the difficult decisions needed and to see the plan through. And he points out how they're helping families in the meantime with an average of £3,500.
Well, that's bad news, because what he's saying there is there are no pay settlements, really, is what he's saying.
What he's trying to do is to appeal over the head of the trade unions to the broader public to say, look, if we give 10% plus pay rises across the public sector, about a fifth of us work in the public sector, that will have knock-on effects to the private sector. That will push up inflation and everyone will suffer. The thing about inflation is it turns good numbers into bad numbers when they're actually lived by ordinary people. Take that retail sales number yesterday, 6.4% up, hooray! The tills are ringing, the economy's booming, but actually that was a big fall in real retail sales because of inflation. It was the biggest fall since 2009. And this is the problem. Inflation is an insidious tax on everybody. It hits the poorest hardest because we know that it's been food price inflation and also, until very recently, energy price inflation, which has hit the most vulnerable households because they disproportionately spend on those things.
Liam, am I being unduly cruel here, but Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, why hasn't he got his finger on the pulse more accurately? He's got access to all these figures, all these trends, and he's far from impressive, isn't he, in his predictions?
Well, I said repeatedly this time last year, inflation is going to be a major, major problem. When I launched my On the Money show in September 2021, the first edition of that was Big Inflation is Back. And here's why. And I was pilloried for that. The Governor of the Bank of England was behind the curve for a long time. He kept saying inflation will be transitory, where you could see in global supply chains post-lockdown there were going to be problems. And it may be now that he's overcompensating because he was slow to identify that inflation was coming. Yeah. He now doesn't want to be slow to identify that inflation is falling.
So, in short, before we bring Dan in here, inflation is heading in the right direction, but not as quickly as anybody would like. We've now got the Chancellor coming out and saying, hey, you can forget getting the pay increases that you're looking for, which really is going to lead to a winter of discontent, and February the 1st being this terrible day of strike action.
Well, you know what? I was listening to the conversation earlier between David Mellor and Scarlett Maguire. There is a lot of strikes going on. If you look at the number of strike days lost in November, that figure came out yesterday with the pay statistics I mentioned, and you take those November numbers and you annualise them, times it by 12, it amounts to 5.6 million strike days lost, right? If that trend continued for the next 12 months. During that winter of discontent, Eamonn, 1979, which we remember as lads, it was 29.5 million strike days lost. So, yes, there is a lot of industrial action, but the 70s was a different world.
Yeah.
The last thing I'd say for now is that in early February, on the 2nd, we have the next decision from the Bank of England, the Monetary Policy Committee. This does nothing to suggest, this inflation number, that we're not going to see another quite substantial increase in interest rates, probably half a percentage point rather than the quarter percentage point which some people were hoping for.
Liam, thanks for your take on all of that.
Let's bring in Dan Falvey, our digital editor, head of digital news here at GB News. Look, really interesting to sort of imagine and understand how these inflation figures will feed into the discussions about whether or not the union should get what they're demanding in these pay disputes. But it's also really important to reflect what the public is saying in this. 3 in 5 members of the public say that they support nurses, that they blame the government in how long this has been rolling on, this dispute, according to an Ipsos poll. And you've been doing your own poll as well on the nurses' dispute specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we see is the government is saying that, look, we can't afford this, and that's the message they're sticking to as a message of economic competence. But that doesn't necessarily always play out with what the public think. And yes, we did a straw poll on Twitter of GB News viewers yesterday, and 13,638 people took part. It found that 61% of people thought, you know, enough is enough. The government should just give the nurses the pay rise they wanted. And that's the difficult message that the government have got to get across. They know that for the economy, they can't afford to do these pay rises, but the public say, you know, these guys looked after us during COVID. They need to get that pay rise.
We've got the Shadow Attorney General coming on a little bit later on, Emily Thornberry. And just in the last few minutes, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has given her reaction to this breaking news on inflation. She says 13 years of wasted opportunities under the Tories have left our economy weak and families worse off. And she says we do not have to continue on this path of managed decline. I mean, is that a fair point? They don't have access to the books. They always argue, don't they, that they would be more generous to nurses. But do you know, is that believable?
I think, to be quite honest with you, any government who is in this situation would end up probably taking the same sort of line that the current government is. And the reason being, because, as Liam was saying, is if you cave to one, you maybe have to cave to the others, and all that does is it increases inflation for longer. And the sooner the inflation comes down, the sooner everything can go back to normal. And what the government doesn't want is to be fighting this come the next election, which is now, you know, only next year.
Yeah. All right, Dan Falvey, Head of Digital News, thank you very much for your take as well, and thank you to Liam Halligan.
Shelley says, I work for local government in the homeless department. We have worked flat out throughout the pandemic and have had a 1.7% pay rise. We're not paid as much as teachers and nurses, but we can't go on strike as homeless people need help. Steve says, lack of funds isn't the issue, it's how it's spent. 47%, says Steve, of NHS positions are spent on non-clinical staff. That's the real issue. Scott, no sympathy for the nurses. Nurses that strike are a total disgrace. Get another job if you feel you need to strike, given the importance of what you do. And John saying that he's got no appointment day in sight for him to have steroid injections in his hips. Like and he says his knee replacement's now on the move, so I'm in chronic pain every single day with no hope in sight of having it relieved. That's the consequence of it all. I think today's a very depressing day in terms of, you know, are we going to settle here? Is there money in the economy? There's not. It's a really bad situation. What is the answer? If you think you know, get in touch.
Time 7:17. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this hour. The Foreign Secretary is continuing bilateral talks in North America today, where he's due to meet with his Canadian counterpart, this time discussing joint efforts on support for Ukraine. James Cleverly will say now's the time to go further and faster in giving the country the tools it needs to win the war.
Suffolk police are searching for 2 suspects after an 18-year-old was fatally stabbed in Ipswich. Armed officers in a police helicopter were searching for the suspects who fled the scene. This was on Westgate Street.
£60 million of government fundings to go towards building almost 6,000 new homes on brownfield sites. The development could also create about 18,000 jobs in the housing and construction sector.
Special report for you now. At least 10,000 teenagers, and we're talking about kids who are about 13 years of age, are being exploited by gangs, criminal gangs, to transport drugs all around the country.
Yeah, most of the so-called county lines gangs are using Britain's rail network to carry huge quantities of illegal drugs and cash to communities right across the country.
Let's go to our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White. Now, Mark's been given access, exclusive access, to follow a major British Transport Police-led operation going after these county lines gangs.
It's the height of the morning commute in central London, and here on the Underground at Euston Station, the police are out in force. They're on the hunt for the County Line's criminal gangs, using the transport network to ferry drugs, cash and weapons. Upstairs in the main station concourse, other officers have stopped and arrested this young man on suspicion of drug dealing. He was found with £1,400 in cash and a cheap burner disposable phone often used in drug deals. This countrywide operation is being led by British Transport Police and their dedicated County Lines unit.
I have 70 staff that are dedicated to this type of work across the whole of the network. We vary our tactics, we vary our locations. You may not see them out there, but they're out there every day looking for criminals that are involved in County Lines activity.
On board a train heading to the Midlands, this is rare access, following these plainclothes officers who are part of the County Lines task force as they look out for anything suspicious.
If you've got valuables in there, the last thing you want is just stuff being stolen, yeah?
A quick chat with this passenger and it's clear he's a legitimate traveller. But in the 3 years this task force has been operational, these officers and their colleagues have made more than 1,500 drug seizures, recovered £1.25 million in illicit cash, and taken more than 500 weapons off the rail network. On the day we were filming, here at Birmingham's New Street station, officers arrested a young man carrying this suitcase with 10.5 kilos of cannabis inside. Further up the line in Wolverhampton, another man and a woman were stopped carrying a suitcase, this time with 6 kilos of cannabis inside. More than 40% of those arrested by the County Lines task force over recent years were teenagers. British Transport Police now works closely with social work and children's charities to identify those who might be victims themselves.
If there is a young person or a vulnerable adult and there's a crime that's taken place but we recognise actually they're a victim of exploitation, then you've got an investigation process and a safeguarding process that can run parallel.
Here at Coventry Station, another team of officers are working with police dog Ash and his keen sense of smell, a key weapon in identifying those worth a closer inspection. It doesn't take him long to pinpoint a likely suspect. As these plainclothes officers searched the man, it's soon clear the police dog was bang on the money.
We've got a sealed bag, approximately £5,000 cash. So the gentleman's been arrested on suspicion of being concerned supply. So we've taken to custody and processed. So we've seized the cash. We've got 2 of his phones, so they'll be seized as well.
With at least 600 County Lines criminal gangs, it is a major ongoing issue for law enforcement right across the country, as our time with British Transport Police starkly illustrates. Tens of thousands of pounds worth of drugs and illicit cash seized in just a single day. Mark White, GB News on the Rail Network.
And with that, we'll take a break. We've got Paul Coit, the big sports stories of the day.
Lots of it about.
What?
Lots of it about, isn't there? Are you excited? Manchester United?
That's a complicated question.
Oh, really?
Complicated question. Okay. So, the country's richest man, he's making a bid for United. Talking more about that after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
What time is it? 27 minutes past 7 o'clock. Hello, good morning and welcome to you.
Still to come on the programme this morning, we're meeting Harry Farrell, dubbed PC Harry. He's a little boy you might have seen on our show a little bit earlier in the week or virally on the internet. He's been leading a police patrol around his area on a replica that he got for Christmas, and we'll be talking to him at 8:45.
And that's Durham Police. Well done, lads. 9:15. Revenge, right? Shakira. Remember, her hips don't lie. But she's released a song to get back at her ex-boyfriend, Gerard Piqué. So we'll talk about whether revenge is a dish best served hot or cold, and if you should turn the other cheek or not. Love a bit of revenge, personally. I think it's a great thing. I suppose you're going to say to me, I don't do revenge. You're going to say that to me. Is that what you're going to say to me?
I think it doesn't sort the problem out. I think it harbours lots of negative things in you, and it's not good for yourself. No, I think it's actually the opposite. However, I understand the desire, and I do love that Shakira is getting her revenge, because that girlfriend of Piqué is going to be dying right now.
So you are agreeing with revenge?
I'm saying it's not the answer, but I can understand the temptation.
The temptation of it. I love revenge. Revenge is a good thing.
I don't ever want to find out.
No, I'm a very good friend.
And an awful enemy.
Awful enemy, as a few people hopefully will find out in the years to come. Right, so let us know your views on revenge. Oh, no, I don't do revenge. I'm woke. Love everybody. Be kind.
Not cool, by the way.
That's not you I'm impersonating.
I'm just saying it's not woke to turn the other cheek. It's like the oldest thing in the Bible, isn't it? Turn the other cheek. Can't pretend the Bible's woke now. It's been around for...
Excuse me, we're going to quote the Bible, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
That's the Old Testament. I'm talking about, Jesus.
The woke bit of the Bible.
No, for goodness sake,
Yeah.
you can't say that.
Why? Why can you not say that?
Well, because
Why?
it's been around anyway. Oh my goodness.
You see, it is good not to like people. It's good to have revenge.
No, Eamonn.
It is. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You see, a lot of people who publicise #BeKind aren't kind
Well,
at
that's
all.
true.
Yeah,
That
that's
is
very true. That's very true. Your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk. What sort of world do you want to bring your children into? Do you want them to be naive and picked upon and bullied, or do you want them to be wise
Tolerant and forgiving.
and execute revenge?
Decent.
Sport's a good area for revenge.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. Let's look at the back pages this morning, and here's we've got one hell of a winner, says the Mirror, right? So Harvey Elliott's goal fires Liverpool into the fourth round of the FA Cup at the expense of poor Wolves. Sweet dose of gin and tonic, says the Star. This features in a lot of the papers. Jim Ratcliffe, the richest man in Britain, he says he was a Man United fan as a child. And he's entered the running to buy his childhood club. Why always me? Fed up with being under fire, the Spurs manager, Antonio Conte, wants the club bosses to explain their strategy to the media instead of him. Instead of him facing the media, why doesn't the club doctors or the chief financial officer or whatever it is talk to that as part of the TV deal at the end? I mean, those interviews they're usually pretty boring anyway because nobody says anything out of line on this. Paul Coit, the man who's going to talk about these stories here. First of all...
I haven't upset you at all, have I? Are we okay?
See, everybody's getting very excited about this Jim Ratcliffe thing at Man United. All I will say is this, that he's got the sort of the plan on board because he made a late bid for Chelsea, which failed. So I suppose the mechanism is there to transfer that and... apply it to Manchester United. But my goodness, he's going to face some competition.
He is going to face some competition, but look what's going for him. They're talking about £5 billion to buy Manchester United. It's from the area.
I think you'd be quite lucky, £5 billion.
Well, it's double what Chelsea was, and it's honestly...
But the Glazers want about £8 billion.
We're going to have to see how we go with the bidding process. Basically, it's going into lawyers now. They've got to register, or with the merchant bank, got to register interest, which he's already done.
Yeah.
So he's made it known that he would like to own Manchester United. He's a Manchester United fan. Now, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing when your heart's in it as much as your business acumen? Because sometimes heart can rule over head. But I think it's good that he's a British man and he's from the area. Surely that's only a good thing that he's a Manchester United fan going in.
Look, at the end of the day, money people, it's all businesses at the end of the day. It's what they can get out of it. So, I think a lot of United fans are naive if they think that new owners are going to be any different than the present owners. So that's all.
I agree with what you're saying, but if you are extremely rich, and he is an extremely rich man,
and he is involved in sport, he owns a couple of clubs.
Well, look at what we've got. We've got Nice, FC Lausanne in Switzerland, in cycling. He's got the Grenadiers. He partners Mercedes in F1, sailing and rugby. So he's got a footprint in all of this.
Yes.
Is there a chance that maybe this could be something? You know what? I've made a lot of money. Wouldn't it be great if it's something that I love and I could get involved with? So maybe it might not just be all business. And I think it can only be good for the club. And obviously the fans want the Glazers out and have done for a long time. And if he comes in, I would think that it sounds like a perfect match.
So last night, the FA Cup tie between Wolves and Liverpool, which Liverpool won by 1-0.
Yes.
That's not the talking point today. The talking point is this prank that went off in the studio, Gary Lineker being the anchor in the studio. And then what happens?
Well, there was grunting and groaning that could be heard in the background.
Yes.
Some could say sex noises, is what some could say. This is where it's come from. And they go, well, where is it? So this Gary Lineker's trying to host the show. Then it's like, well, where has that come from? Now, what since has transpired is that there was a mobile phone that was taped to the back of the chair. So someone has planned this. Now, I've also seen videos since, and I don't know whether this is because it'd be quite easy for someone to be going, oh, look, this is us when we set this up. But we'll probably find this out in the next couple of days. It looked like a group that do pranks, and that's a thing that they try and set up. They're on the phone, they're talking to someone at the ground and saying, yeah, OK, is it there? It's there. Yes, OK, it's there. Right, I'm going to ring the phone. So those noises were a ringtone, because obviously you could change any ringtone.
So it wasn't porn that was
It wasn't actually porn that was playing in the background. It was the sound of that. And so that's done as a ringtone. They phoned it. So, of course, everybody's looking around thinking, where is it? They couldn't find it until afterwards. Taped to the back of the chair.
And who'd have thought he'd make the front of the Sun newspaper? Gary Lineker's
I know.
porn scandal.
He did. I've got to say, he handled it well. He did handle it well and found it pretty funny.
He did. They call it today, the front of the Sun. They say match of the way. Hey. So that was quite funny. Quite funny. It has to be said. Extra time added on in football matches. Sometimes it gets to a ridiculous stage.
Well, when we say ridiculous stage, what you mean that there's too much time added on or too little?
Unless it's Fergie time.
I was going to say, been a Manchester United fan back in the day, but we saw this for the World Cup. And when we see games in the World Cup, we think, oh, there's 7 minutes added on, there's 10 minutes added on. But what they're actually doing is timing it properly. And I was looking at a report. Average ball in play, so in a 90-minute game in the Premier League, the average time was 55 minutes. That's all for the ball to be in play.
55 out of 90.
Out of 90. So there's IFAB a meeting, and they make the rules. They're meeting today. Now, there's two ways of looking at it. Either they can actually police it better and sort of thinking, OK, you've got to add time for this, add time for that, or have a countdown clock. You know, it sounds unheard of in football, but if they have a countdown clock that starts and stops, when the ball's out of play, then we will get the full 90 minutes. I mean, it'll be a much longer stay and we'll probably get more goals, but at least we'll get more football in there as well.
You could look at ball and play time as part of the strategy. You know, nobody sits and says, oh, American football, the ball's not in play. I mean, they have, God, that's a boring game.
It's so stoppy-starty, though.
So awful, awful. Yeah. But I think, I mean, personally, I don't really have an issue. If someone kicks the ball into the stand or whatever it is, that's part of the game to me.
Do you think so?
Of course it is.
Well, I don't. I think that the World Cup had it right. I just think the time added on, if you're wasting time or if you kick the ball out, it's one thing holding on to the ball on the pitch. Yeah. So, you know, if you want to pass it around, that's fine because the ball's in play. But when the ball's out of play, stop the clock. And then we'll carry on from there.
Speaking of stopping the clock, we are almost out of time, but I've got to ask you about the Australian Open. Andy Murray defying the odds, still Nadal's out, but what about the fashion?
Unbelievable. Andy Murray's been amazing. We've got Emma Raducanu, who plays today against Coco Gauff. But the fashion, I've got to mention, Frances Tiafoe. If you have a look at this, we've got Frances Tiafoe with this new look. Tennis fashion is changing all the time. Hopefully we'll get a picture of Francis in his new gear, which is magnificent.
Unbelievable.
But I don't think we've actually got it, have we? I don't think we've actually got it because...
what is his gear?
Well, it's a new... Maybe I might even have to save it for tomorrow. It's just a new tennis fashion, and I just think it's something that maybe...
Will I not like
you should
it?
Look at.
It's all white, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Well, that's the Wimbledon way. Australian Open is something completely different. Okay. But there's lots of colours involved.
No from me.
That much.
Thanks,
Paul,
mate.
thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed. We'll take a break there.
We will. After that, we'll be back with David Mellor and Scarlett Maguire. See you in a sec.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory,
twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own news from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Going through the papers this morning, David Mellor and Scarlett Maguire. Scarlett, we go to the Mirror and front page for them, and they're worried about the NHS strikes crisis. What's their take on it?
Well, their take on it is that if you break the strike, if you're an agency nurse and you break the strike, you get paid £40 an hour, which I'm sure a lot of nurses would love to have. I mean, I do think this NHS strike... I've had a meeting with my surgeon cancelled today, so I'm somebody who's affected. But I was in last week with my cancer consultant, so she's not a nurse, you know, she's very well paid, and she said, I am at the end of my tether. We are not coping with the numbers coming through. I mean, the last time I did chemotherapy, there were 70 people in there. You have these amazing nurses. If they get anything wrong, I mean, we die, right? Yeah. I mean, it really is. And you have these, and they have to be nice to everybody, and they have to take them through. And what I cannot believe is that the government isn't taking this seriously. It's been coming up for ages, and then we're sitting there saying, oh, nurses are terrible because they're going on strike. And Kelvin Mackenzie on this station said, well, they should just leave. Well, the whole problem is they're leaving and they're doing two people's jobs. Yeah. I mean, we've got to do something.
Who's responsible for the agency workers' wages, though? Because I saw that Pat Cullen's written to the government today and she's asking for this special recruitment and retention premium. And she says, if you give us that, then we'll try and address the issue of agency wages, as if it was in her power. But if there's this shortfall of 47,000 nurses, presumably it's it's not just her problem.
No, I mean, it's not really in her power. But if we could hire more nurses and keep them on, then we wouldn't use agency. Though I have to say, the problem of agency nurses is decades old. I mean, there's nothing new about it. And actually, a lot of NHS nurses do agency. Yeah. Well, they do agency work to top up their salaries. I mean, which is pretty terrible in itself.
A viewer, Ian, says the government should make nurses pay up to, say, £30,000 per year, totally tax-free. So you wouldn't have to give them any money. You just wouldn't take tax off them to that level. He said it would mean a huge monthly salary increase without altering the gross salary and more cash for the lowest paid workers. Is that sort of proposal doable? Can you massage the figures?
No, you couldn't do that. It would be regarded as anarchic. You know, you earn money and you pay tax on it. What tax you pay is a matter for government judgment. But to take people out of the tax system altogether, I mean, I think this is all very unfortunate. But one thing is absolutely certain, and that is that the government will not want to throw over an independent element in determining what pay rises should be, because that is their protection against what is otherwise, frankly, ludicrous suggestions of 20% increases and things like that. And yeah, it would be interesting. What I find extraordinary is that the government are there defending the increases that an independent body has proposed. Why don't we hear from members of the independent body about what occasioned, their suggestions? But in the meanwhile, Eamonn, I don't know whether we're going to have time, hopefully, to deal with, or The Guardian and others have now gone online with these inflation figures.
Not as encouraging as I think everybody was hoping. We were led to believe, there'll be a big dip in inflation.
No, it's absolutely not. And you think, some of these government spinners are completely inept because they were lining people up to think that it was actually going to be quite a sharp fall. And, of course, it isn't a sharp fall. And
going from 10.7 to 10.5.
I mean, it was barely noticeable within the range of error that it's possible when pulling the figures together.
I was reading about this yesterday, and the forecast was it was going to fall to 10.6, but the Bank of England governor was talking about this sharp fall happening in the next month or so. So it's not as if they're completely out, because it's happening now, this fall in energy prices. This is always looking back at December, isn't it? I don't think the forecasts were widely out.
But where we are is that as a result of all the fandangos with Truss and so on, the inflation in this country has had an extra push over and above the inflation that is afflicting other countries. Now, we've got to get rid of that extra inflation. You do not do that by allowing wage increases to ape the rate of inflation. And, one needs to remember, in the exciting days of Michael Foot, it was 28% inflation.
28%?
28%.
Incredible.
I know.
Absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
But, David, as well, people don't like to hear this, but has Brexit given an inflationary aspect to what's going on? But people don't want you to say this today, but we're just being realistic about this. It's led to staff shortages, which has led to inflation within wages, competition for jobs.
I mean, I'm in an interesting position on this because I hated the EU and I despise the arguments in favour of Brexit. I think the whole thing is a debate that was totally misconducted. And the principal reason it was misconducted was this idea that somehow or other there were big gains for the country in Brexit. Of course, there aren't. And what we're now seeing is that just passing a law saying we're out of the EU doesn't do anything. It requires line by line going through legislation, thousands of pieces of legislation, and then maybe something good will come out of it. Yeah. But the Brexit argument, the Brexit debate, was conducted on simplistic, almost childlike way.
I want to ask Scarlett's views on this, because, of course, as a former Labour advisor, I find this really interesting, the whole Brexit debate, because, of course, Keir Starmer came out ardently in support of Remain. In the immediate aftermath of the result, he wanted a rerun, didn't he? Obviously, we've got a general election coming next year. I mean, he's ruling out trying to row back on Brexit, but it's an argument that, David's making that is gathering momentum, that Brexit hasn't delivered what people expected or hoped for.
No, I mean, I think that what Keir wants to do is, as he puts it, make Brexit work, is to actually have a much softer Brexit. I mean, I think that what he feels is that to reopen the argument would be wrong. And it did absolutely polarise the country. I mean, I have to say, I would like to go back into the EU, so I don't agree with him.
Well, you suspect he would actually?
Well, I think... Interestingly, I met him first when he was Brexit secretary, and he said, if I was negotiating, I think I could negotiate a really good deal.
But he would say that, wouldn't he?
No, he said this...
There's no evidence for that whatsoever.
But this is what he always believed, that there was another way to do it, but actually the way... Quite clearly, the way we're doing it at the moment just doesn't work. I mean, one of the things that this freedom of movement, as everybody says, it's why we've got such a lack of staff. And actually, you talk about pay rises. I mean, in the private sector, it's much, much higher than the public sector, because the private sector have got to they've got to bring the people in, and they've got to make it. It's not that they've got nurses and teachers who really want to do the jobs. I mean, they're in pubs and things. You have to persuade people to go and work there because they haven't got their normal lot. So I think it's hit hard. It's what a lot of us have said. But actually, I mean, I think reopening would be really, really difficult. And so what you have to do is you have to say, how can we make it work?
OK. Actually, earlier, we've only got 30 seconds left, but we were asking whether or not people should be allowed to eat cake in the office, and we've been asking people at home to get in touch. I'd have to be Eamonn I'd like to live with. Isabel would starve me and feed me lettuce and hummus. What's your view on all this, Scarlett?
I'm with Isabel. I think cake is really bad for me, and I love it.
Yeah, we all love it, and we probably wouldn't go out and buy it, but if it's in the office...
I really don't want it in the office.
This is the thing. Well, we disagree.
Yeah, but that story, really, it's not just about cake in the office and whatever. It's about the government delaying a watershed for junk food advertising. And it's a complete market failure, says the head of the Food Standards Agency.
And Rachel Sylvester has got a double-page spread on it in the Times, just about how important it is that the government takes it seriously. It's costing the NHS a fortune, you know.
Yeah, but it's the power of the food lobby. The power of the food lobby.
Yeah.
Something. Let's talk about it next time you're back, when you're back in 45 minutes' time. Guys, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. Want to talk about a real hero now. 5-year-old Harry Farrell, right? Harry is from Teesside, and we featured him on Monday on this programme after we saw his story on social media, because what happened, there he was at home in Durham, and the police turned up. It wasn't as bad as you may have thought, because he became an honorary police officer, an outrider, a motorbike rider for the day. Look at that escort that he had there from Durham Police. Absolutely, look at him. Proud as punch, absolutely fantastic. And the reason the police turned up and they helped him with all of this, because Santon brought him that beautiful little toy motorbike there. And Harry's daddy, Craig, died last May, and Durham Police knew that he'd gone through a lot, and they thought, hey, let's give him a surprise, let's cheer him up. And that was the result of all of this. So we're now going live to Harry's home this morning, and Harry is there with his motorbike, and his mum, Emma, there's his mum. Oh, Harry's a bit shy today, Emma, it seems.
He is. I'm so sorry. He's been sat patiently.
Oh.
I'm so sorry.
Listen, don't worry, he's 5 years of age, and he'll look back at this on his 21st birthday, and it'll provide hours of endless amusement to people. But he's been through a lot, Emma. Emma, tell me about when the police turned up, and tell me about how all that came about and what that meant to him.
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely wonderful. I expected one police bike, but certainly not four. Harry had a really, well, we all have had a really, traumatic year last year with losing his dad. And he's been such a good boy that he, on his wish list, off Santa, he'd asked for a police motorbike. So Santa, of course, because he'd been such a good boy, brought it. And I'd posted a little snippet on Facebook, and one of my friends had seen it, and her hubby was in the Durham Traffic Police and asked if he'd like a visit from a real policeman, and he did.
Oh, it's great for them. Harry, I'm going to ask you a little question. You mightn't answer me. You might want to answer me. But if I could ask you a question, Harry, what would you like to be? What job would you like to have when you grow up?
Police.
Would you? Would you really? Do you think you'd be a good police officer? Would you want to be a police officer that walks, or would you want to be a police officer that rides a motorbike?
Which one? Do you want to walk or ride your bike? Ride my bike. Ride his bike.
Harry, have you to go to school today?
No. Yes, you have. You're going to school.
But you see, when you become a police officer, you'll have grown up and you won't have to go to school anymore. Would that be good? Yeah. See, absolutely brilliant. So tell me about the neighbours, Emma. Tell me about everybody in the street. How did they react to all of this? Did they think you were in trouble when the police turned up, or did people turn out to applaud? Yeah.
Well, I'm not a trouble causer, so no. But yeah, they did. They all came out, and yeah, they just all joined in, and I think they just loved seeing Harry's face as well. It was just lovely to see him smiling again. And apologies, he's not normally like this.
Listen, please don't apologise. As I say, in years to come, this will be hours of endless amusement watching this video. But while he's out of sight there and out of earshot, he's probably way off to play with his bike. How bad a year has it been? How bad a year has it been for you and everybody? And how are you doing?
It was the worst year of my life, really, and my children. And I guess we have good days and bad days still, and it's just still not sunk in. I don't think, reality is that it's still going to come back, but sadly that's not the case. And it's the little things like this that really kind of help make things bearable, and just to see Harry smile like that again it's just so heartwarming and priceless, really.
Yeah, I suppose a lot of people have a lot of opinions on the police in various ways, but this really was above and beyond the call of duty, wasn't it?
Oh, completely. I mean, they do get a lot of bad press, but I can't thank them enough. They weren't here for hours and hours. It was just a very short time, and what it did for Harry, it's made his year. For the year he had last year, this was just the most amazing way we could start this year. So I cannot thank them enough. And also, they've got a new recruit because he was going to be a teacher and now he wants to be a policeman.
Yeah, he may end up in prison the way he's throwing things around there. The police may be coming to get him. But listen, I know you've got to get him to school, and it's a busy morning. Really appreciate, Emma, you taking the time and being such a good chat with us there. He's a good boy. Tell him we love him. Big hug from us.
Quickly, say bye.
Bye. Goodbye and good riddance, Eamonn. You're saying, say Uncle Eamonn. Say,
Oh my God.
Thank you. Before he wrecks the house, we'll say goodbye to you. Thank you very much indeed. Absolutely
I tell
brilliant.
you what, as a mum, I can tell you, Emma would have been sweating there. That would have been really stressful, having a screaming child, knowing you're going on national TV. But yeah, respect, Emma.
Harry's off to school. We're off to a break. See you after this.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Nurses begin walkouts amid warnings that the worst day of strike action in a generation is on the way.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. It's Wednesday, the 18th of January. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
You're very welcome. Thank you for your company and leading the news this morning. Patients are being told to expect widespread disruption as nurses begin a 48-hour walkout this morning. The nursing union has warned that if progress isn't made by the end of January, there will be further strikes next month. The government has told us that talks are ongoing.
We are working to resolve this dispute. Ministers have met with the Royal College of Nurses on numerous occasions, and we want them to call off these strikes, which will have an impact on patients.
The escalating industrial action comes amid warnings that February the 1st could be the worst day of strike disruption since 1979, with rail workers, teachers, university staff and civil servants all heading to the picket line.
The Prime Minister has promised a bonfire of EU laws by the end of the year to promote growth and speed up economic recovery. His comments come as inflation falls to 10.5%. It's not as low as it's expected this morning. And GB News has an exclusive access to major police operations targeting the criminal gangs using the rail network to transport their drugs and illicit cash.
We've got a sealed bag, approximately £5,000 cash. So the gentleman's been arrested on suspicion of being concerned supplier.
This morning, nursing staff in England across over 55 NHS trusts are continuing their strike action today and tomorrow in that ongoing dispute with the government over pay and conditions.
Let us know if it's affecting you today. We'd like to hear in what ways. Patients could again face disruption to operations and appointments, although nurses will continue to provide emergency care.
But February could see double the number of nurses joining the picket lines as the RCNs announced a further 2 days of strikes early next month across 73 trusts.
OK, so earlier in the programme, we spoke to an ICU nurse, an intensive care nurse, and her name's Kelly Hopkins, and she is a nurse in Liverpool, and she had this to say.
I came into nursing over 25 years ago, and I became a nurse because I wanted to be able to look after somebody in their hour of need, if you like. I wanted to be able to brush their hair, hold their hands, give them the care that they need when they're unable to do that. And at the moment, we're not able to do that. There aren't enough nurses. There's 46,000 nursing vacancies that we can't fill, because how do we attract new talent into the job? I was speaking to a young nurse who's just qualified, who was over £85,000 worth of debt in student loans because she'd had to qualify up to master's level. And then she's coming into a job and earning £26,000 a year. That's before tax, national insurance, pensions taken out. They're coming in and working in conditions that are horrendous at the moment. So how do we attract new talent into the profession? We can't.
And attraction into the industry. But let's talk about those who are actually out on the picket line. Our West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson's currently in Stafford at St George's Hospital. Jack, what's happening where you are? Oh, snowy.
If it snows anymore, I'm going to become the abominable snowman. But here on the picket line this morning, I've been speaking to some nurses about what it is that they're striking for. And the main thing that's been repeated to me this morning is the understaffing levels on the wards. Wards, they don't feel are staffed enough to be able to provide patients with the care that they want to give the patients. And that all really stems from what they've been telling me this morning from pay. And that if pay was better, then they wouldn't have to try and fill so many vacancies, and so many nurses that are coming into the profession wouldn't go into things like agency work. But here's what one nurse this morning told me.
For me personally, I think it's more about patient safety and staff levels, and I feel that we're not attracting new staff. New staff are interviewing for jobs, saying they're going to take it, and then not actually turning up. And I feel that's mostly down to the pay, and that's where the pay comes in, where I'm concerned. Yesterday there was 5, and this morning there's 7 out of our team. Obviously, if patient safety is at risk, then they'll be derogated back to work, because that's our priority after all. I just want more staff so it's safe for the patients, a better experience for the patients, and staff not carrying vacancies on the back.
On that issue of pay, Steve Barclay saying that while he recognises the pressures of the cost of living, unaffordable pay rises, he says, will stoke inflation. But the RCN General Secretary Pat Cullen saying that today's strike action by nursing staff is modest escalation from December, before a sharp increase if a deal can't be reached 3 weeks from now, as you mentioned, as strikes go into February. She said that people aren't dying because nurses are striking. Nurses are striking because people are dying. And so for patients trying to get care today, like you mentioned, things like critical care, chemotherapy, emergency cancer services, that's not affected. And in terms of A&E, nurse staff there are running Christmas Day style shifts. But we know from the December strikes, around 30,000 appointments had to be rescheduled. And so similar disruption will be happening for people trying to get care today.
Downing Street and get some reaction to the Office for National Statistics published inflation figures this morning. Down a little bit, but the Chancellor saying still got a lot of work to do. Darren McCaffrey.
Yeah, indeed. When you look at those inflation figures, they are at least moving in the right direction. However, pretty slowly. For most people, the cost of living is still increasing, and increasing quite significantly, it must be said, Isabel. Now, one of the reasons that is falling is that in certain sectors, costs are starting to finally fall. And we know that energy prices, thankfully, have not gone up by quite as much as we thought or feared this winter. Yet at the same time, the government has got this target of trying to get inflation half by the end of the year. Now, are we likely to get there? I think we probably are, not least of all because we are just naturally expecting inflation to fall. We cannot just simply expect that things are going to flow or increase. Inflation is going to increase quite as quickly as it has done in the year in the past. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, you know what, we are in this situation where the cost of living squeeze is going to continue. The government's going to have to address it, frankly, but at least there is a glimmer of good news this morning.
8 minutes past 8, you're listening and watching Eamonn and Isabel on Breakfast on GB News. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
Well, as we've been discussing, UK inflation has eased back in December to 10.5%, down from 10.7% the month before. The ONS said falling fuel costs were largely behind the slowdown in the pace of price rises, with average petrol prices down by 8.3% per litre month on month in December. The Chancellor says these figures show there's still a long way to go.
Country anywhere in the world with inflation over 10% is seeing it at frankly dangerous levels for the stability of an economy. But for families up and down the country, they are seeing food price inflation of nearly 17%, and that's causing a massive hike in the cost of the weekly shop. And what that really shows is that for us and for other countries, the most important thing is to stick to a plan to bring down inflation. The Prime Minister said that he wants to halve inflation in the coming year, and for families and businesses, it's absolutely essential that we stick to that plan.
Suffolk police are searching for 2 suspects after an 18-year-old was fatally stabbed in Ipswich. Armed officers in a police helicopter were searching for the suspects who fled the scene. This was on Westgate Street.
£60 million of government funding is to go towards building almost 6,000 new homes on brownfield sites. The development could also create about 18,000 jobs in the housing and construction sector.
At least 10,000 teenagers, some as young as 13, are being exploited by criminal gangs to transport drugs for them. GB News can reveal.
Well, most of the so-called county lines gangs are actually using Britain's rail network to carry huge quantities of not just illegal drugs, but also cash to communities right across the country.
Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Mark's been given exclusive access to follow a major British Transport Police-led operation going after these county line gangs, and it makes you think when you jump on that train, who's there with you? Have a look.
It's the height of the morning commute in central London, and here on the Underground at Euston Station, the police are out in force. They're on the hunt for the county line's criminal gangs, using the transport network to ferry drugs, cash and weapons. Upstairs in the main station concourse, other officers have stopped and arrested this young man on suspicion of drug dealing. He was found with £1,400 in cash and a cheap burner disposable phone often used in drug deals. This countrywide operation is being led by British Transport Police and their dedicated County Lines unit.
I have 70 staff that are dedicated to this type of work across the whole of the network. We vary our tactics, we vary our locations. You may not see them out there, but they are out there every day looking for criminals that are involved in County Lines activity.
On board a train heading to the Midlands, this is rare access, following these plainclothes officers who are part of the County Lines task force as they look out for anything suspicious.
If you've got valuables in there, the last thing you want is just stuff being stolen, yeah?
A quick chat with this passenger and it's clear he's a legitimate traveller. But in the 3 years this task force has been operational, these officers and their colleagues have made more than 1,500 drug seizures, recovered £1.25 million in illicit cash, and taken more than 500 weapons off the rail network. On the day we were filming, here at Birmingham's New Street station, officers arrested a young man carrying this suitcase with 10.5 kilos of cannabis inside. Further up the line in Wolverhampton, another man and a woman were stopped carrying a suitcase, this time with 6 kilos of cannabis inside. More than 40% of those arrested by the County Lines task force over recent years were teenagers. British Transport Police now works closely with social work and children's charities to identify those who might be victims themselves.
If there is a young person or a vulnerable adult and there's a crime that's taking place, but we recognise actually they're a victim of exploitation, then you've got an investigation process and a safeguarding process that can run parallel.
Here at Coventry Station, another team of officers are working with police dog Ash and his keen sense of smell, a key weapon in identifying those worth a closer inspection. It doesn't take him long to pinpoint a likely suspect. As these plainclothes officers searched the man, it's soon clear the police dog was bang on the money.
We've got a sealed bag, approximately £5,000 cash. So the gentleman's been arrested on suspicion of being a concerned supplier. So we've taken his custody and processed. So we've seized the cash. We've got 2 of his phones, so they'll be seized as well.
With at least 600 county lines criminal gangs, it is a major ongoing issue for law enforcement right across the country, as our time with British Transport Police starkly illustrates. Tens of thousands of pounds worth of drugs and illicit cash seized in just a single day. Mark White, GB News on the Rail Network.
Well, with that, we're going to take a break, and then we're going to be speaking to Labour's Emily Thornberry, and we're talking about inflation, we're talking about the government ripping up EU laws. Is it all talk and no action? We'll tell you right after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 8:18. Still to come on the programme.
Yeah, and I hope your day's going very, very well. At 8:45.
I love this topic.
Yes, revenge. That's Shakira. Her hips don't lie.
Shakira.
Yeah, and so her ex is a footballer, Gerard Piqué, who played for Barcelona. He played for Manchester United.
He played her as well.
He did that. So 100 million people have tuned in to see how she's gained her revenge on YouTube. And she sings a song where she says, "You've traded in a Rolex for a Casio," or something like that. Yeah,
brilliant.
So the lyrics are quite good on that. We'll try and get those lyrics. There's Andrew Pearce.
Yes, he's in at 9:15 talking about his take on all of the stories of the day, no doubt with views on all of those as well. And let us know your thoughts this morning. What do you think about all of the topics we are covering?
We specifically want revenge stories.
Yes.
Revenge, is it good? Is it cathartic?
Have you ever, because you say you talk a good game about all this. You do. You talk a good game about it, but actually all the people in your life that you've had ding-dongs in the past with, you're on great terms with now, when I think about it.
No.
No? Mostly.
What? Like Anthea Turner?
Yes.
Yeah, well,
exactly. Princess Tippy Toes.
I'm prepared to forgive.
Exactly.
Forget.
I do think you're quite good at getting over tiffs.
No, but there's other people who've got names who I can't.
And I was just suddenly thinking, Eamonn, and let's not go there.
And that's the thing. And I think once you cross, there are evil people. Let's face it, there are evil people. There are.
Sure.
And in the fight against good and evil, which I am good. The only sort of enemy you want is a defeated enemy. Oh.
I agree. Well, look, when it comes to someone like Putin, you've got to do what you've got to do. However, I do think revenge can eat you up. And actually, it might be better for yourself.
I feel really good.
For your spirit.
For
your energy, if you just let it go and you forgave. Just saying. Let us know your thoughts.
I'm like the equalizer. Council tax was introduced 30 years ago.
At all?
Yes,
I did not know that.
Really, I thought it was like here from 1659 or something.
Yeah, that's news to me in itself. Top line there.
So the idea was it was another tax, and this was to help local authorities pay for everyday things that we take for granted.
But there's been research done by money.co.uk which shows actually, if you live in the north, you're likely to pay more council tax.
OK, and it's recently been found that Rutland Council in East Midlands is one of the highest tax rates in the country. How is that? Why is that? Our national reporter, Theo Chicumba, has the story.
It's used to pay for waste collection, street lighting, road maintenance and more. How much you pay is dependent on your circumstances, which valuation band your property is in, and how much the council needs to fund its services. Here in the East Midlands, there's mixed views on how much they pay.
I know the councils have got work to do. I think partly with Rutland it's because it's such a small county that they don't perhaps get the economies of scale that other places will get. But I think, there needs to be some accountability for where all the money's going, I think.
It's difficult on the working sort of people like myself, really, I would say. Can you compare it to London? Well, maybe not, with two different places, but it's certainly high here. I can't deny that.
With everything else going on, trying to let your pension stretch, to cover everything is a bit too much, really, I think, I've lived around here all my life and it's got worse over the years.
If you live in a house here in Rutland in East Midlands, your council tax is around £2,300 a year, making it one of the most expensive in the country, and it's set to increase again. Whereas if you live in the southeast, in London or here in Westminster, the average council tax is cheaper than those who live in the Midlands or in many parts of northern England. Data by money.co.uk suggests that council tax bills are 20% higher in the north of England than in London, even though homes here in the capital
are 3 times more expensive. The average Band D bill in London this year is £1,696 compared to £2,060 in the north of England. At this local authority, they say council tax counts for 78% of their budget and that households here receive £504 from central government, almost half of what other parts of the country receive.
In an ideal world, we would be absolutely saying, right, well, we're going to have a council tax freeze. That really wouldn't be fiscally responsible because we would end up with some really, really difficult to make decisions in the coming years, which would actually negatively impact our residents even further because we would have to look at the level of service provision on some of our key core services.
While an additional £33,000 support fund is available for households who need it the most, leadership here argue local government funding needs to be revised to even out disparities and make the system fairer. The Comber, GB News.
Now, the Office for National Statistics has announced that the rate of Consumer Prices Index inflation fell to 10.5% in December from 10.7% in November. Well, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said 13 years of wasted opportunities under the Tories have left our economy weak and families worse off. Let's get the views of the Shadow Attorney General, Emily Thornberry, I'm pleased to say joins us this morning. Good morning to you, and thank you for joining us in this extremely cold weather. We really do appreciate it. Look, your take then on this positive in some ways, reduction in inflation, but not as fast as I suppose any of us would like to see.
No, well, I think that's the point, isn't it? I mean, it's good that the inflation rate has gone down, but nobody should be putting out the bunting if we're talking about inflation over 10%. I mean, it's still the third worst inflation figures for 40 years. So, no, nothing, I'm afraid, to celebrate. I mean, maybe we're going in the right direction, but, we've got a long way to go.
So it vindicates the Chancellor then in his hard line on these negotiations with the unions, because he's absolutely clear by giving these inflation-busting pay rises across the board to public sector workers will stoke inflation, and that is the single biggest enemy, biggest problem we're facing.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because I don't think that that the government is thinking of giving people above 10% pay rises, but they're talking about giving them well below 10%. And obviously, therefore, that means that people in public services are effectively being told that they should take pay cuts for the sake of inflation. And when we see that the inflation rate is not... It may not be entirely the fault of the government, but, government behaviour has not exactly helped. And so the inflation rate in this country is worse because we've had 13 years of failure by this Conservative government, particularly recently with the reckless behaviour of Kwasi Kwarteng and the kamikaze budget that he introduced, which has had a direct result in terms of bringing up interest rates when it comes to people paying their mortgages.
And the Chancellor, I'm sure, would probably agree that that is a huge challenge for him to try and tackle. But as you generously say, not entirely the fault of the government. We're seeing global inflation struggling, not least because of this war that's being fought in Ukraine. But also, as the Governor of the Bank of England has argued, we're seeing problems in this country due to labour shortages, worker shortages. What would Labour do about that? Because we know that Sir Keir Starmer wanted to remain in the EU, as did you. How would you solve that problem?
So as Keir said, what we need to do is we need to be able to train up people in Britain to be able to fill some of the vacancies that we have in Britain. That would be the ideal. But in the meantime, it's right that we ask people to come from other countries, and we do it on the basis of a points-based immigration system, which is what we think should happen. And at the moment, it's just not happening. And yes, we're seeing all kinds of industries that are having terrible trouble filling vacancies, and that isn't helping with growth, far from it. In fact, we've had a government that has manifestly failed to grow the economy. I mean, I'm not even asking them to be as good as we were when we were in government with the amount of growth that we had. But at least it would be good if we were as good as our international competitors. But no, we have been bumping along the bottom when it comes to growth for far too many years, and are now in negative growth.
Well, the PM today is promising to try and conduct a bonfire of EU laws in a bid to boost growth.
Well, I think that the PM may say that, but I suspect that it's got more to do with keeping the right wing of his backbenchers happy. I think that the difficulty is that we were in the EU for some 50 years. There is a very large amount of legislation that we adopted from the EU, and we can't be confident that we have introduced legislation to replace it. And so the idea of kind of just burning it all up at the end of the year and let's see what happens is a kind of reckless behaviour that frankly this country can do without, particularly if some of that legislation protects environmental standards or employment rights or health standards. You know, all of these things actually are important and are important to get right and shouldn't be, you know, burnt away on some pyre which is all to do with Tory dogma and not to do with what's good for the country.
Talk about keeping the benches happy. I want to talk to you about this emergency debate that took place in the Commons yesterday in relation to the gender debate that's happening, Scottish Parliament passing a law which Westminster has now blocked. An important, a serious debate being conducted in the Commons yesterday, and yet a female member of your party, Rosie Duffield, being heckled, being laughed at, being sneered at by her colleagues, all of whom were male, from within her own party. What do you make of that? It's not a good look.
So I was in the chamber during the front bench speeches on this, and yes, it's about the Gender Recognition Act, which has been introduced in Scotland, and the Conservative government has now vetoed with Section 33 of the devolution powers. And there was supposed to be a debate around it. I have to say, I don't recognise your characterisation of it being a serious and careful debate.
OK, but what about Rosie Duffield, your colleague, in her own words, who described that male colleagues were laughing at her?
I mean, I certainly heard one of my colleagues saying, no, Rosie, that just isn't right. I mean, I did hear that.
Ben Bradshaw dismissing it as nonsense.
I was a couple of rows in front of her. And then I heard a lot, maybe it was being drowned out by the Conservatives on the other side, who I could hear shouting, you know, go on, Russ, you know, Rosie, you're right, etc., etc. I mean, this was not a debate that was frankly Parliament's finest hour, in my view. I think on the one hand, we had the Conservatives wanting to stoke some sort of culture wars, and on the other hand, we had the Scottish nationalists, you know, deciding that they were going to sort of fight the battle of nationalism again. And that's what it was all about. And frankly, the last thing that anyone was thinking about, in my view, was the very marginalised people, those people who are some of the most vulnerable in our society, who are trans people. And also, you know, and also there were being no clear debate to reassure women who are concerned, some women who are concerned about women-only safe spaces. Yeah. Well, look, that seems to be such a long way down the agenda of so many people who are there.
Sounds to me as if you are unconcerned then that a women's campaigner was being laughed at by men in the Commons. But anyway, look, we're out of time. I just want a yes or no answer on this.
Well, you can say that, and that would not be true, but you can say what you like.
I'm just saying that's what it sounded like. I mean, you can disagree, but it sounded like you're unconcerned by it. Listen,
well, I don't know. All I can say is that I was there and that wasn't what I saw.
OK, well, your colleague argues differently. Anyway, I want to ask you a yes or no answer. Was Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, right to block Scottish law, and would Labour have done the same?
We would not have done the same thing. We would have negotiated with the Scottish Parliament, because that is the only way that it can be sorted out. It can either be sorted out through the courts, which looks like it's where it's going to go, or it could have been done in a grown-up way, which is the UK Parliament and the Scottish Parliament could have sat down together and said, OK, gender recognition is something which has devolved, equality is something which is not. There will obviously be border issues as a result. We need to sort out what happens in the middle. We need to be able to sort this out. And you should be doing that by discussing things. But all we got was Kemi Badenoch turning up the day before the legislation was passed. That's not exactly negotiations, is it?
OK. Emily Thornberry, Shadow Attorney General, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Stay with us.
See?
What's that?
You annoyed her.
I didn't. It just didn't cut away.
She's a lawyer.
Yeah, that's
she's
true.
She's in fact.
Yeah?
She's all that, and she just, when you said thank you, she's... Very nice coat though, Emily. Very nice, all well wrapped up. I love the Egypt who was standing beside her, protesting about it.
Didn't see what he was protesting about.
The thing is, he thinks he's on telly, right? So he's standing there, and all we see is this big pole. That's all we see. You don't see what a sign is, but he thinks, oh, I've got them now. I'm standing in shot. My message is being broadcast around the world.
No,
on
just a big pole.
Just this big pole. That's all we saw. David Miller and Scarlett Maguire with the newspapers right after this.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here we are with the papers again. We serve them up to you today with David Miller and Scarlett Maguire, who have been with us all morning. David, the Prince Harry interviews continue. Yeah. The fallout from his book continues. What have you got to say, this from the Telegraph?
Yes, it's the suggestion that this ill-advised comment on any view of Harry's of having killed 25 Taliban is now being used as a justification by various elements in Iran to justify things like executing that poor ex-minister who was, of course, also had British citizenship. And I just think that the Harry situation, I mean, what a stupid thing to say. He spent years saying that he was worried about the safety and security of his family and that we had to pay for his protection. And then he says something that really, I mean, I can think of plenty of fanatics rubbing their hands with glee and thinking, we'll have a go at him.
Yeah, well,
of course, it gives
terrifying.
him justification, doesn't it? I suppose it also gives him justification, Scarlett, that he can go back to his daddy and say, look, you're leaving me exposed. I mean, the fact that he created the problem for himself. But
I think the problem with Harry is he never thinks anything through. I mean,
Yeah, that's
I
the
don't
point.
think. I mean, I just think it was one of those things that he thought, well, I'm telling them all about my life. I'm telling them what I did, and this is what I thought as I killed the Taliban. Not as though. I mean, you know, the whole reason he was out there was to kill the Taliban, and obviously Iran is just using it as an excuse. But you sort of, I mean, you just think, Harry, grow up, right? Grow up and actually understand what you're really doing. And, you know, maybe you shouldn't tell us all about your life and every bit. It's just madness.
I mean, he said he had enough material to write a second book and that he'd gone through and chopped a load out. But he didn't have the foresight to chop this bit out and think through what the consequences
But that's a
might be.
threat, isn't it? I mean, we're not going to talk about that. But the fact that he says that he had to cut half the book, that's a threat.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Definitely.
that is a threat. But also, I suppose you've got a book company or you've got a television network saying, hey, we've paid you all this dosh, what are we getting in return?
Yeah.
So there's pressure on him to sell the secrets. Scarlett, front page of the Times, and inside the Times as well, healthy living we're talking about here. What's the take?
I mean, what Rachel Sylvester is saying is that Boris Johnson promised us a decent food law that actually stops to try and make us healthier, because he realised that one of the reasons that he was so ill with COVID was because he was massively overweight. And he came out and said, I now know. And since then, incredibly, nothing has happened. And you know, we talk about a crisis in the NHS, obesity, which is mostly caused by overeating and eating the wrong things, is costing us millions and millions.
Yeah.
And the poor people so you're more likely to get cancer, you're more likely to get type 2 diabetes. If you need a hip replacement or bone, I mean, it is just appalling. And actually, then you have the sort of right-wing Tories, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg saying, oh, no, this is the nanny state, and Liz Truss saying, I don't care how many, you know, 2 for 3 or whatever they are, that you have.
Both of whom are thin people.
Yeah,
yeah.
Absolutely. And some people, unlike me, don't have a problem staying thin. Me, I have to try and not eat the cake and the chocolate. And I'm like most people, and we see it. And actually, you know, if we've got a National Health Service, it's free, it's part of the state. Therefore, the government has a duty, just as, you know, we wear seatbelts because that, and it has a duty to actually think about what we eat.
But the problem, I think, is, I mean, God, all those years ago when I was Minister of Health, I remember one of my senior civil servants saying to me, Minister, we don't have a National Health Service, we have a National Sickness Service.
Yeah.
And that was all about prevention being better than cure. But you see, when I look at the Times, don't let them eat cake. And what I don't understand is there's a perfectly good message, and it's not mainly cake that causes it, it's chips and things like that. Why on earth has a senior civil servant, the chairwoman of the Food Standards Agency, why is she allowing herself to be caricatured by appearing to be saying that people shouldn't have a bit of cake on their birthday in the office?
Yeah, but
that's just stupid.
Yeah. What do you mean allowing herself? I mean, she can't dictate what way the press...
But I'm sure that it's been presented in that way.
In a press release?
Yes, I would have thought.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think a trivial, stupid way when we're actually, the truth is, in years to come, we see how we're being poisoned by the food industry. And America is the big culprit in all of this.
Terrible.
What they serve us, the way they serve
Giant portions.
Giant portions, absolutely sickening.
But I do think workplace treats is a big issue, and I do think it's interesting that the Times have decided to front page this. And I know from experience that with the rise in working from home, employers are increasingly trying to think of ways to entice people back into the office. For example, my husband's company, on Fridays, they do delivery Fridays, and they can order in whatever they want, and it's on the company. And he always comes home on a Friday going, oh, I don't need any dinner, I've eaten too much. And I'm like, they're poisoning you. You're eating rubbish the rest of the week. You're healthy.
I was
They're
going to
trying
ask
pull
you,
in.
maybe
You don't look after him properly.
It's not my job to look after my husband. Hello, 2023.
Well done. You're not suspicious of stuff that you get served up in the office or whatever.
No, that's what I mean. It's, you know...
No, but you're suspicious of it. I mean, you know, people, some lovely, kind people who are viewers and listeners and whatever would send me things every now and again, but you can't because you don't know where they've come from. You can't eat them. You don't know where.
I don't
where
get sent nice things in the post generally.
But when I was writing a book about companies, and I went to see Mars, who were really nice, and everywhere there were plates full of Mars things, and I thought if I worked here, I'd look like a house. There's no, I mean, because I have no self-discipline. The only way I stay reasonable is by not buying things at the supermarket, not in the house.
You know, I'm a grown man in my dotage almost. And why do I eat like a child? Now, for instance, I have an obsession recently with jelly babies.
With what?
It's very, very hard.
Jelly what?
Jelly babies.
No, come on, you cannot admit to that.
No, well, I'm telling you, that's the way it is. It's very hard to find jelly babies. Now, there is a supply issue with jelly babies. You could try go around shops and say, "Could I have a bag of jelly babies?" And if you don't, you know, get them and buying them for Eamonn. You know, you can say that. Very hot. You go to shop and say, "No, I haven't got any. Haven't got any." Why? Why? Where have the jelly babies gone?
Right. So this is a really serious issue. Is it the lack of jelly babies for Eamonn?
I'll tell you what another issue is. Say fruit pastels, for instance, or wine gums. I do not like green in either of those. The green colour, right?
It's all coming out now.
Greens. I don't like green jelly babies either.
Right.
And there seems to be disproportionately more greens than the blackcurrant ones, or the orange ones, or the lemon.
So they're doing you a favour.
Yes,
you're eating it.
They're trying to
save
keep
up
you
the green
thin,
ones and hand them to me, and you can have my orange and my lemon ones, which I don't like.
We could do a trade deal and all of that one.
Yeah.
Scarlett.
Rather more importantly, is maybe you should be eating less jelly babies.
I have thought about this. I do think it's a bad issue. It's a bad promise. So listen, there's a big economic forum going on. Is this in Davos? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, there's a message coming out here, which is a surprising message. This is in The Guardian, and the rich gathered there, the ultra-rich we're talking about, and they're saying we're happy to pay more tax, are they?
Yes, I mean, this is not all of them, right? I mean, we do know that there's quite a lot of people, of British, very rich people who decide that they're going to live in Monaco and places so that they don't have to pay tax. But this is, and it's in America, it began in the States, and it's people like the heiress to Disney have said, actually, we make so much money. You've got to tax us properly, and what they're saying is that in this area of inequality, this is the only way to get it down. It's not about rich people saying
philanthropic.
It's very good because lots of rich people say, well, I will give some money to a foundation. But actually, the thing about tax is it's not a choice, right? Is you give it and it's the way. Because, I mean, in the pandemic, it showed that the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. And the inequality gap is massive.
It's not a big election winner, is it, though? Because they're just fleeing the country as soon as they hear you're going to tax the rich more.
But then they tax other people who are not rich and are deemed to be rich, and people get envious. Oh, they earn 60 grand a year, they earn 80 grand a year, they're
taxed
rich.
the same as the billionaires.
Well,
I'm not
Eamonn is filibustering because he doesn't want to talk about the new ownership of Manchester United.
You're right. No, he does. Done by a man who does quite a lot to keep his taxes low.
OK, well, listen, let's talk about our next subject's coming up now, and I want your opinion, which is revenge, right? And this is on the basis of the singer Shakira. So her and her husband have gone their separate ways, and she hasn't taken it well. She's brought out a song where she has the lyrics, things like, you swapped a Ferrari for a Renault Twingo.
Brilliant.
And a Rolex for a Casio. That's her revenge on him. Scarlett, what's your view on revenge?
I think what she's done is very funny, it's very witty, it's wonderful. It's very difficult to do witty revenge. And I think by and large, when people ask me about it, I just say, stay quiet and let it go. But actually, you take the moral high ground. I mean, particularly, if he's left you for some floozy, right? Keep quiet. And if you're well known, don't go to the papers.
Why is she always a floozy? You see, the point is, Shakira, I don't know Shakira personally. I know her hips don't lie. But maybe there's two sides to every story. I mean,
There are.
She doesn't eat jelly babies, you can be sure of that.
What do you think of revenge?
I imagine you like to serve revenge. You're a lawyer after all.
Well, you
You've
make
been
money
served.
out of revenge,
Exactly.
of course, as a lawyer. But was it revenge is a dish best eaten cold?
Yeah,
so you
served
spend years
cold.
and years brooding over it.
I don't have the energy for revenge. I'm too
Actually,
tired.
I forget what I was angry about.
You get your strike in first. That's why.
Maybe.
That's why.
Yeah, no, I explode and then it's over.
Right. So let's now
Thank
talk
you,
to
David and
Fran
Sally.
Foley-Wilston. Fran
Yes.
is a comedian and a playwright, and she joins us today from the Emerald Isle, from Dublin. Hello, Fran. And then beside her,
good morning.
and Fran, and then Sally Jones, journalist and broadcaster there, who I think is a bit anti-revenge. Are you, Sally?
Yes, I am. I really think that thing about if you wish to take revenge, dig two graves. I really think that's so true. I know that it's really tempting. You see somebody like Vivian Leigh when Harold Pinter left her for Lady Antonia Fraser, and she said very wonderful sort of acid put down. She said, oh, it'll be so handy now that she's moved in with him because they can share the same pair of slippers. And apparently, I believe they both have size 9 or 10, or did have size 9 or 10 feet. I went to a journalism awards ceremony that she was at, and I'm sorry to say that the old boyfriend I took with me actually got on his hands and knees under the table to go to the other end of the room to check out the size of dear Lady Antonia's feet. And he came back and they indeed were a size 10.
Blimey.
Now, Fran, you're joining us from Dublin. I just want to check, are you Irish?
I am indeed.
Good. Now, Fran, do we look at it differently? Because I quite like revenge. I have no difficulty with revenge. Is it in our blood, revenge? Are we like, the fighting Irish? Where do you stand on revenge?
I don't think it's an Irish thing because I genuinely think Shakira, I think it's brilliant what she's done and it is very clever and very witty. And if you look online, the support for her isn't coming from Ireland, it's coming worldwide. There's lots of yes, Queen, and people are very supportive of it. It's not like she set fire to his house. She's an artist, she's expressing herself through her art. When Elvis Costello wrote I Hope You're Happy Now back in 1986 about his ex-wife and was very pithy about her new relationship and said, I didn't love you anyway, no one batted an eyelid. But Shakira writes this revenge song and suddenly everybody's up in arms saying, oh, how could she air their dirty linen? But what's interesting is he hasn't come back and said she's wrong. There is a whole history there. If you look it up, she's landed with this whole tax mess that's very complicated, so I won't go into it. But it's because she uplifted her life to live with him. There's a whole thing. They have 2 children. Obviously, she doesn't want her sons to think she's let their dad walk over her and she's trying to set an example for them. I don't think the song is that bad. I do think it's very clever. She hasn't revealed anything too personal. She's revealing her feelings. It's no different to Emma Thompson giving that interview saying how heartbroken she was and how worthless she felt after Kenneth Branagh's affair. It's just that because it's a song and it's on the radio, it's probably getting more coverage than something like that. But it's much better than some of the action she could have taken.
OK, so Shakira maybe wasn't that bad, but Sally Jones, when we look at people like Dominic Cummings, who seem to be dropping bombs, as they like to describe it, on Boris Johnson every opportunity he got, or now we look at Prince Harry with his book, with his interviews, with his Netflix series, attacking the royal family constantly. It's in vogue, isn't it? And I just wonder, does it actually bring peace and does it make you feel better? I would argue probably not.
Obviously it doesn't. I mean, Harry's there with Meghan singing like a canary. And actually, the people who've taken the moral high ground are William, Kate, King Charles. They've been totally silent. They make him look like an emotionally incontinent jerk, basically, because they've just sat there. He knows that they can't answer back. But the trouble is, the more they're silent, the more he's going to come with ever more ridiculous claims, all this rubbish about, I was only given 2 sausages and William was given 3. I mean, the kind of breathtakingly paltry jealousies and silliness, he just makes himself look stupider and stupider. I can see that the great attraction of making $100 million, or if you're Adele or Shakira, when you're going to make a lot of money out of dishing the dirt on your exes, obviously Taylor Swift has done it. And as an artist, I can see the joy of that. But as a civilian, I can remember when I was chucked by a boyfriend and I just wanted to go and howl in the corner and just sort of pull my head off pretty much. And a mate came round, gave me a big hug and said, "Oh, he was never much good anyway. You're much too good for him. Just go out with your head held high." So I did not say a word. There was no tears in front of the boyfriend, no recriminations, no writing about it, nothing. And within about a year, his relationship had broken up. And I think the fact that I had not made a big bunny boilerish sort of fuss about it, he came back and wanted to resume relations, which I said no. But
how satisfying. But that's revenge in a way. You got your revenge, but you got your revenge in a different way. I would argue that in the Harry debate, I actually think William and Charles aren't necessarily in a better position. Yes, they're not exacting revenge on Harry, but I imagine they're very unhappy, and suffering in all of this.
Yes, which brings me to the point, Fran. My mother had a great phrase, a great Irish phrase, which Sally alluded to there, and that is, they'll lick where it lay. So it's like a cat or a dog. They don't eat their food, but if you take the food away, they'll go to the place where the food was, and they should really have done something about it, but they didn't. So they'll lick where it lay is the phrase. They've both missed out on Isabel and Sally have missed out on this whole joy, this whole word. I think it goes by the term cathartic in revenge. Do you get catharticism from revenge?
Yeah. Well, I think there's also that Groucho Marx thing that you wouldn't want to belong to a club that would have you as a member, rather like your lick where it lay. The moment you can't have whatever it is, whether it's the girlfriend or the plate of dog biscuits, you immediately want it instantly.
Yeah. Instantly. Fran?
Well, I wrote a whole play about a breakup. Now, the relationship was abusive, so the play was about how people get sucked into those abusive relationships because I felt it was important to put that out there. But it actually is quite cathartic, and I'm writing a comedy show at the moment about a breakup as well. And it genuinely is quite cathartic, and the first drafts just kind of pour out of you because, you're just getting it all out of your system. But obviously it's refined and there is a bit of dramatic license and you're not using necessarily real names. Unlike Harry, obviously everybody knows who the people involved in that are, even if he changed the names. But it is quite cathartic, and sometimes it's a learning thing for other people as well. I mean, we look at Shakira and we think, well, if she got cheated on, what hope is there for us?
She's beautiful.
But, yeah, and my play, like I said, it was about how people get sucked into abusive relationships, and we did Q&As at the end, telling about things like the red flags and the signs. So it actually proved quite worthwhile, and it has helped other people as well. And they've learned from my experience, hopefully. I mean, obviously, anything can happen to them in the meantime. And hopefully as well, the stand-up show that I'm doing, yes, I mean, there's an element of, it's not revenge, but I want people to know what actually happened. And I do have the receipts, so you can't argue with anything about it. But, also things like that, they are a learning curve for other people, because people recognise things in their own relationships when they hear something like that, even with Prince Harry's memoir. And there are a lot of discrepancies between other things that he said, but people are reading parts of that and recognising things that go on in their own family. We all have, at the end of the day, family disputes. So even though
I really think that
I've got to stop you there, guys. I've got to have a dispute with you guys. We're running out of time as we approach 9 o'clock. But we just want to say, we may not be in agreement with whether the revenge is good or bad, but I think we're all in agreement that Shakira has done a great job with her form of revenge. Fran Foley-Winston, thank you. Sally Jones, appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We're going to have lots more for you after the break, including the latest on the strikes. And also Andrew Pearce will be here to give us his take on all of the big stories of the day. Don't go anywhere.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Nurses begin walkouts amid warnings that the worst day of strike action in a generation is on the way.
9 o'clock is the time. A very good morning to you. It's Wednesday, the 18th of January. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Patients are being told to expect widespread disruption as nurses begin a 48-hour walkout this morning. The nursing unions warned that if progress is not made by the end of January, there will be further strikes next month. The government's told us that talks are ongoing.
We are working to resolve this dispute. Ministers have met with the Royal College of Nurses on numerous occasions, and we want them to call off these strikes, which will have an impact on patients.
The escalating industrial action comes amid warnings that February the 1st could be the worst day of strike disruption since 1979, with rail workers, teachers, university staff and civil servants all heading to the picket line.
The Prime Minister's promised a bonfire of EU laws by the end of the year to promote growth and speed up economic recovery. His comments come as inflation falls to 10.5 this morning. And
nursing staff in England Nursing staff in England across over 55 NHS trusts continue strike action today and tomorrow in the ongoing dispute with the government over pay.
Patients could again face disruption, and patients have been told to prepare for significant disruption to operations and appointments, although emergency care will be provided.
Now, February could see double the number of nurses joining picket lines. Further walkouts are planned over the next 2 months.
We asked Robert Jenrick how the government plans to settle the nurses' dispute.
Why can't you settle this year? Is the cupboard bare for this year? Is this like hire purchase or something that you're paying ahead for next year? Why can't the effects of inflation, the effects of the cost of living crisis are affecting these workers now, here and now, not next year, right? They can't afford their bills now. That's what they're worried about this winter. Why can't you say, here's a few quid to look after you this year?
Well, the way that public sector pay has worked in recent years has been through independent pay review bodies, and the unions, like most parties in British public life, argued for those because it takes the politics out of this and ensures that it's not ministers ruling by fiat, but it's through evidence-based policy making where the different groups come together, they present arguments, and that's what's happened this year.
Right, well, here's one intensive care nurse at Aintree University Hospital. This is Kelly Hopkins. This is what she had to say earlier this morning.
I came into nursing over 25 years ago, and I became a nurse because I wanted to be able to look after somebody in their hour of need, if you like. I wanted to be able to brush their hair, hold their hands, give them the care that they need when they're unable to do that. And at the moment, we're not able to do that. There aren't enough nurses. There's 46,000 nursing vacancies that we can't fill, because how do we attract new talent into the job? I was speaking to a young nurse who's just qualified, who was over £85,000 worth of debt in student loans because she'd had to qualify up to master's level. And then she's coming into a job and earning £26,000 a year. That's before tax, national insurance, pensions taken out. They're coming in and working in conditions that are horrendous at the moment. So how do we attract new talent into the profession? We can't.
Well, our South of England reporter Ray Addison is in Brighton at the Royal Sussex County Hospital for us this morning. Good morning to you. I can see a sizable picket line behind you. Just tell us a little bit about what's happening where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got about 70 or 80 nurses here on the picket line and nursing staff. It's very well represented this morning. This is the biggest picket line in Brighton, also Brighton General. There's a similar scene happening there. I'm joined now by Hugo Bastos. He's an emergency department charge nurse. He's also an RCN representative. Hugo, thank you very much for joining me. This is the very first time that nurses in Sussex have striked. Why today? Why now?
So we are striking. Our official mandate is we want 5% of a raise above the inflation rate. But this is so much more than pay. This is a way for people to understand that we want safe staffing, we want better recruitment, we want people, newly qualified nurses, to come to the profession not with a big student loan and not being able to afford their food and their house and everything else. This is so much more than pay. This is about providing safe care to our patients. Right now, realistically, if you look at our corridors, we have corridors in emergency departments with over 30, 40 patients with 2 nurses taking care of them. This is not great care. This is not the best care that we want to give, and this is not why we became nurses in the first place.
Well, you work in the emergency department. There was a bit of a dramatic scene earlier on when about 20 members of the nursing staff that work in the emergency wards actually walked out and joined the picket line here. What do you say to people watching and listening to GB News now who would be maybe worried about the level of care that's going to be provided by Royal Sussex today?
So, as a representative for the Royal College of Nursing, one of my roles is to do derogations. I'm part of what's called the strike committee. We have safety staff levels to ensure that we are making that patient safety comes first. These people that walk out to their posts, they are doing it because it's with a heavy heart that they do these decisions. It's not something that we decide lightly to walk out from the way we work. So right now we have people covering for them as much as they can, and we're keeping safe level as much as we can and as much as is legally possible. I do think that it's important to reiterate that this concern about safety Patients are not saved every single day. It's not just on strike days. Patients are dying in corridors. You have people that are lucky to be able to use a bottle and to pass urine under a blanket in the middle of the corridor, because people that can't move, people that can't be mobile, are too poorly to do it. They sometimes are in their urine and their feces through hours and hours because we don't have the staff to provide basic care. So this is not just about strike days. Strike days, yes, it's important. And as the Royal College of Nurse had ensured that ways were put in place to keep these safety levels, but we do need to walk out and we need to shout these emotions that have been choking in our throats for so long now, because this patient safety care and patient safety concern should be all days, not just on strike days. But answering your question, as a strike committee representative, yes, we ensure that there are safe numbers for our patients as much as we can.
Hugo Bastos, thank you very, very much. Well, as you can see, a lot of passion here, a lot of emotion, a very large and lively picket line, and it's set to continue tomorrow as well.
OK, Ray, thank you very much indeed for updating us there.
The Office for National Statistics this morning has released the latest inflation figure, 10.5% in the 12 months to December, down from 10.7% in November. Hardly much of a decrease, but it is in the right direction. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, now from Downing Street to give us his take. Darren.
Yeah, very good morning, Eamonn and Isabel. As you say, that is at least heading in the right direction, those inflation figures, Eamonn, but only just, it must be said. And it is a reminder that even though inflation is easing, it still means that the cost of living is rising, and quite substantially. These inflation figures historically are the highest we continue to see for 40 years. Now, why are things easing? Well, fundamentally, it comes down to things like petrol and diesel and oil to a degree. Essentially, the heating of our homes and the cost of travel has fallen a little bit. There is no doubt that the government's efforts this winter also have ensured that inflation is not quite as high as it could have been with the extra money they've doled out to households. However, it is primarily food that is driving up the cost of living this winter. You look at things like baked beans, they're up 50%. Tinned tomatoes from Spain also up 50% in price. You know, essentially that's a massive increase, isn't it? Pasta up 24%. Some of the staples of the household food budget massively increasing. Restaurant costs, unsurprisingly, also pushing up inflation because of those higher food prices, and hotel costs as well. Now, the government have got this target of trying to halve inflation by the end of this year. There is an expectation that is going to happen irrespective almost of what the government does, as we are expecting inflation globally to fall. Again, not least of all because we're expecting energy prices to fall further, and finally those food prices to start to ease off. However, that is little comfort, isn't it, for people in the weeks and months to come who may well go to the supermarket, down to the local coffee shop, maybe book a hotel stay for the bank holiday weekends coming up, and they will cost a hell of a lot more this year than they did last year, and we're still a long way off from trying to ease that inflation figure. And even if we do aim and get down to half of what it was a year or 2 years ago by the end of this year, it'll still be historically quite high, and we're going to have high inflation for many years to come.
In theory, of course, the prices, what goes up, they think should go down, but I bet you once things go up, they rarely go down.
That target of 2% feels like cloud cuckoo land, doesn't it?
It's shrinkflation with products and packets of stuff and things as well. It's all just going to be more expensive, which, you know, gives a lot of credence to what people are asking for. But the cupboards are bare, it has to be said. Council tax, another expense. We told you this morning it was introduced 30 years ago to help local authorities pay for the services they provide.
But research by money.co.uk shows if you live in the north, you are likely to pay more.
It's recently been found Rutland Council, there in the East Midlands, has gone to be one of the highest council tax rates in the country.
How is this possible? Our national reporter Theo Jacumba has been looking into it.
It's used to pay for waste collection, street lighting, road maintenance and more. How much you pay is dependent on your circumstances, which valuation band your property is in, and how much the council needs to fund its services. Here in the East Midlands, there's mixed views on how much they pay.
I know the councils have got work to do. I think partly with Rutland it's because it's such a small county that they don't perhaps get the economies of scale that other places will get. But I think you know, there needs to be some accountability for where all the money's going, I think.
It's difficult on the working sort of people like myself, really, I would say. Can you compare it to London? Well, maybe not, with two different places, but it's certainly high here. I can't deny that.
You know, with everything else going on, trying to make your pension stretch, you know, to cover everything is a bit too much, really, I think, you know. I've lived around here all my life and it's got worse over the years.
If you live in a house here in Rutland in East Midlands, your council tax is around £2,300 a year, making it one of the most expensive in the country, and it's set to increase again. Whereas if you live in the southeast, in London or here in Westminster, the average council tax is cheaper than those who live in the Midlands or in many parts of northern England. Data by money.co.uk suggests that council tax bills are 20% higher in the north of England than in London, even though homes here in the capital are 3 times more expensive. The average Band D bill in London this year is £1,696 compared to £2,060 in the north of England. At this local authority, they say council tax counts for 78% of their budget, and that households here receive £504 from central government, almost half of what other parts of the country receive.
In an ideal world, we would be absolutely saying, right, well, we're going to have a council tax freeze. That really wouldn't be fiscally responsible because we would end up with some really, really difficult to make decisions in the coming years, which would actually negatively impact our residents even further, because we would have to look at the level of service provision on some of our key core services.
While an additional £33,000 support fund is available for households who need it the most, leadership here argue local government funding needs to be revised to even out disparities and make the system fairer. The Comber, GB News.
Time is approaching 9:15. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's news.
And we start with a breaking story. 16 people have died after a helicopter crashed near a nursery outside Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. The National Police Chief says Ukraine's Interior Minister was killed in the crash in the town of Brovary. The cause of the crash is unknown, and there's been no immediate comment from Russia.
Inflation eased back in December to 10.5%, down from 10.7% the month before. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says these figures show there's still a long way to go.
Country anywhere in the world with inflation over 10% is seeing it at frankly dangerous levels for the stability of an economy. But for families up and down the country, they are seeing food price inflation of nearly 17%, and that's causing a massive hike in the cost of the weekly shop. And what that really shows is that for us and for other countries, the most important thing is to stick to a plan to bring down inflation. The Prime Minister said that he wants to halve inflation in the coming year, and for families and businesses, it's absolutely essential that we stick to that plan.
£60 million of government funding is to go towards building almost 6,000 new homes on brownfield sites. The development could also create about 18,000 jobs in the housing and construction sector.
Rounding off the programme this morning with Andrew Pearce and the top stories, his views on them after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. We are discussing the top stories of the day now with GB News presenter and consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce. Good morning to you.
Morning to you. Nice to see you.
Treat ahead of our show tomorrow.
Yes, and you're looking fabulous in canary
do you like
yellow.
It? I was
Very
worried
good.
that people might need sunglasses on this morning.
Well, why not?
Dial down their screens.
Dreary, dull winter's day.
Should we start by talking about Emily Thornberry? We had her on about an hour ago, and yeah, she didn't seem
didn't
too
really
concerned.
answer your question.
Yeah, she didn't seem to be concerned about a female colleague being jeered and laughed at by members of her own party.
Rosie Duffield, who's a very brave MP, she's a Labour MP for Canterbury. Amazing that Labour ever won that seat, and she's taken a very principled stance, rather like J.K. Rowling, about trans rights. She thinks it's putting women's rights second. And she's right here, and she supports also the Tories spiking Nicola Sturgeon's pro-trans legislation in its tracks. She's speaking in the Commons chamber and jeered on her own side by male Labour MPs. And you'd have thought Emily Thornberry would have had something to say about that.
I would have thought a female shadow cabinet minister would have stood by another woman in that, because her concerns are legitimate.
They are.
Totally justified to say them, not least because that is the legal advice that the government has been given. There's actual legitimate legal backing to that view.
And also, look, it's too young to let kids change their gender at 16, and if they change it in Scotland, they can then come to England, or can English kids go to Scotland and do the same thing? The government are right to get to grips with this. And I think Rosie Duffield is very brave. And let me tell you, some Labour MPs worry she might defect to the Tory party.
Interesting. And do you think that could happen?
Well, you never know. You always hear about defections going the other way, but how extraordinary it would be that a woman was driven out of her own party because of male prejudice and prejudice from the sisterhood because of her principled stance on the trans issue, which most people watching this programme agree with her on.
Yeah, well, tell me, though, do you think that Rishi Sunak looks tough, he's done the right thing with this Article 35, or do you think, as somebody I know who's a Scottish nationalist, that she was fuming for a minute and then she was delighted?
No,
because it really gives fuel to the fire for Nicola Sturgeon. It's really enraged the nationalists.
Polls in Scotland suggest that up to 80% of people oppose what Nicola Sturgeon's doing. If she wants to pick a fight with the Westminster Parliament, I get that, but don't pick it on the issue of allowing 16-year-olds, without any medical support, without any definition of dysphoria, to change their gender after 6 months. That's the wrong issue to pick the fight with. It's a big mistake by the nationalists, and it's going to put Keir Starmer in a very difficult position. He said at the weekend, I think 16's too young. Hurrah, he's got an opinion. He got off the fence once. That makes a change, Keir Starmer. Will you vote against it? Oh, I don't know. And, of course, Scottish members of the Scottish Parliament massively support it, and it's the Tories who are leading the charge against it.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I think that's going to rumble on.
Yeah.
Can we talk about another really interesting story you picked out from the Telegraph? And this is about the role of TikTok in illegal crossings of the
Staggering
channel.
that TikTok has been running adverts for people smugglers so people know how to book their crossing across the channel, where they give discounts if you've got a disabled migrant, often economic migrants, of course, in my view, discounts if you've got children on board. So, first of all, how has this been allowed to go on so long? The government are now going to legislate in the online safety bill to make it illegal, and if the people behind companies like TikTok don't do anything about it, Ofcom, the regulator, can take 10% of their revenue. That could be up to 100 billion. So let's hope they don't do anything, because that's 100 billion this country could do a lot.
Yeah,
with.
well, it sounds good, but I just can't imagine them ever having the teeth or the
I
wherewithal
think
to actually follow through.
If you are Facebook and all these companies, they all seem to own all the same companies, you're going to think, what does it look like? You're allowing people smugglers to advertise. But if we know that people smugglers are advertising on TikTok, Isabel, why hasn't the police gone to the advert sources and arrested them?
Yeah, if it was only so easy. Right, let's go to your paper. I love this story. This is in the National Trust have come out and said Henry VIII was disabled.
If I was a member of the National Trust, this would be the final straw. I would
gone woke, or even more woke.
More woke. Henry VIII's 6 wives probably wouldn't say he was disabled. He was one of the country's most fabled horsemen. The reason he got into health difficulties towards the end of his life, because he had an accident on his horse and his weight ballooned from a 32-inch waist to a 52-inch waist.
52, is that
yeah.
right?
But he carried on. He had 6 wives, and he was obese, not disabled. Why can't the National Trust stick to their job of being custodians of our magnificent homes and stop rewriting history? He wasn't disabled.
I wonder if they think that makes the National Trust seem more inclusive. I mean, what is it? What's the reason that they've decided? Yeah, what is the point?
What is the point of meddling with?
Let us know if you're at home and you are disabled and you're watching this and you're hearing this. Does it make you want to go to a National Trust property or?
He's probably, after Elizabeth I and Queen Elizabeth II, our most famous monarch, and I've never heard anyone suggest the old brute.
And do you actually want him as a champion? I mean,
no,
exactly.
A man who picked a fight with Rome over
decapitated wives,
created the Church of England on the back of a divorce, and beheaded 2 of his wives.
Yeah, not my pin-up, that's for sure. Right, let's end, shall we, on this cake debate. We've been talking about it all morning. Eamonn was very much of the view, for goodness sake, live a little. Charlie, our producer, said, I'm not here for a long time, I'm here for a good time. And I took the view, I wouldn't eat cake in a normal day, but if it's being shoved under my face and it's someone's birthday, it'd almost feel rude not to. So I'd rather it wasn't that.
Look, cake in the office, of course it's not great for us, but it livens up the day.
You know, you're quite careful with what
I'm very careful with what I eat, but I have the odd treat. But to compare eating cake in the office to passive smoking is mad, because you have a choice to whether to eat the cake or not.
Is it?
Yeah, you choose whether to eat the cake. You don't have any choice about absorbing other people's cigarette smoke. So she's got it wrong. But I think she may be cleverer than we think.
Okay.
Perhaps she did this deliberately, because we're now talking about it.
Well, that's true, yeah.
And a lot of people are talking about it, and it's on the front page of the Times, and it's a great talking point.
And look, we look at the state of the NHS. We've got a huge obesity crisis. It wasn't just Henry VIII.
I know. And I have to say, and all the time I've been at GB News, nobody's offered me any cake.
Well, make sure we do something about that.
And clearly not you either, because you look so fabulously slim.
This is why I love you. We'll have more from the wonderful Andrew Pearce bright and early, 6 o'clock tomorrow, and I'll be back with him. But up next, it's Tom Harwood. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television and online, across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes,